Chapter 1. Behind the Betrayal. Michael, or the former Emperor Ladora I guess, and Feldway the Mystic Lord were gone. The fight hadn't been settled, but I suppose both sides were too injured to continue. That led to some unaddressed concerns for me, but for now, I wanted to celebrate the fact that we were all okay. I could worry about sweeping things up and working out plans later. Unfortunately, Caroline, Fry, and the others were still stuck in evolutionary sleep, so I arranged for them to be left with Testarossa and politely sent on their way. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I know you're tired and all." "No, please, don't worry about us. Take your time to recover from your fatigue. You need to regain your strength." It was painful for me to receive that advice, but I might as well follow it. I could think about other stuff once things settled down a bit. First, it was time to rev myself up with a little party. I was hoping to invite Laplace, but when I sent Diablo to pick him up, he reported the guy was already gone. I guess even Diablo knew how to worry about his friends, at least a little. So, along those lines, I opted not to try tracking down Laplace just for the sake of this party. Our promise to fight together was still ongoing. If he ever needed any help, I was planning to give it. For now though, I thought it better to leave him alone. So I returned to our capital city of Rimuru, where I received some rather unexpected news. One section of the town's outer border had been burned to the ground. Geld and his forces had kept the area defended at all times, so fortunately, the damage wasn't as bad as it looked. They had demolished some of the surrounding buildings in order to create fire breaks, so the number of casualties was kept to a minimum as well. The lack of fatalities was a great silver lining, but it still wasn't very pleasant news to be greeted with. Regardless, it was all in the past, no point freaking out about it now. So I decided to be patient and wait for Geld to provide me with his report. Geld, however, wasn't the only one waiting in line to brief me. We were all in the town's large banquet hall. My top staff, who had outdone themselves once again in this battle, were seated, a small army of attendants, including Shuna, Haruna, and Gobchi's servants, busily scurrying around and preparing meals for everyone. I wasn't a great fan of conducting our briefings in this festive atmosphere, but given the urgency, I didn't have much choice. Veldora was by my right side. He stubbornly refused to vacate that seat, and it wasn't like I could ever convince him otherwise. That selfish streak of his was nothing new to me, so I was used to dealing with it. Best not to let it bother me. It was a lot easier to ignore him than try to change his mind about anything. So he was on my right, and I had Benimaru seated on my left. Xian and Diablo were standing behind me, ready to listen to whatever I had to say. I knew Diablo wouldn't care, but I really wished Xian would at least dine with me, but no, she insisted on eating later. I guess it'd violate one of her self-imposed rules or whatever, but that was fine. As for the people giving me reports tonight, I had Geld in front of me right now. Adelman was opposite Benimaru, looking uncomfortable. I suppose his evolution had completed successfully, and he seemed a little different to me. I intended to have him lay it out for me later. Ramirez was right in front of Veldora, and Trainee and Beretta were standing behind her, waiting on her hand and foot. Cherise, meanwhile, was pouring Veldora's drinks for her, and Ramirez was too busy stuffing herself to care much about reporting back to me. "Aw, I always knew you'd be all right, Master. When that reckless, no-good sister of yours blew apart the top levels of my labyrinth, I gotta admit, I wasn't exactly feeling good about our chances, but I still believed we'd be fine if you were around. I wasn't worried a single bit from the very start." Ramirez said all of this with a straight face as she enjoyed a flagon of juice. It was truth intermingled with bald-faced lies, but nobody bothered to point it out. Quahahaha. But of course. Even against my sister, I wasn't the slightest bit intimidated. I simply let my guard down a bit is all, and thanks to that cowardly intruder's attempt to strike me while I was down, my fight against her was completely spoiled. I definitely thought he was intimidated, and honestly, the evolved Velgrind really was a menace. I gave Veldora no better than even odds to defeat her, besides. Why couldn't he hold off on the big talk for a change? That was my opinion anyway. But Veldora was greeted by massive applause nonetheless. You never fail to amaze me, Sir Veldora. There is much I could learn from you, Cherry said, solemnly nodding to himself. Truly a tremendous battle. I thought my evolution strengthened me, but now I know just how far I still need to go. Benimaru was chiming in too. And his praise actually seemed genuine, which made Veldora give him a smug smile. But the good times stopped when Ramirez opened her mouth. Ah, you're so careless sometimes, Master. Still, that's probably gonna be all right. Probably? What do you mean, Ramirez? You see? I thought. Better to let sleeping dogs lie. Being too loose with your speech has a way of painting you into a corner sometimes. Well, you know, with all that he's doing, but, you're here now, Master, so I've got no worries at all. Ramirez's words were quite disturbing to me. What? Well, I am invincible, of course. But even I might not be fully on my game every single day. Veldora seemed to pick up on what this meant. Now he suddenly began making excuses, perhaps realizing he had dug his own grave. It was too late for him though, and this kind of thing always happened to him anyway, so I didn't bother fretting over it. Personally, I was more concerned about Vesta sitting in the far corner of the hall. I left Veldora and his pals to their own nonsense and asked the rest of my staff what was up. Immediately after Rimuru left for the Empire, everyone who remained behind promptly went into emergency mode. The post-celebration excitement that prevailed across the city was gone in a flash, and that was true for Ramirez and her cohorts as well, as they returned to the innermost chambers of the labyrinth. The Dragon Lords under their control had completed their evolutions, which cheered Ramirez up considerably, but given Rimuru's emergency deployment, she was still anxious. Ramirez's aim in life was to make every day as fun as possible, and with the labyrinth, she felt that she had a glorious paradise that'd make her wish easy to fulfill. After spending so long all alone, fending off the solitude with her elemental spirit friends, this realm had become something precious to her, something she never wanted to lose again. In fact, she was afraid of losing it. She thought things would work out like they usually did as long as Rimuru was around, although she still couldn't shake off a certain premonition. But that hunch was right. Veldora's sister Velgrind wound up attacking and destroying much of the labyrinth Ramirez saw as her pride and joy. The structure was physically indestructible, but when faced with a true dragon, a personification of unfair, irrational force, very little was impossible. When Ramirez first caught sight of Velgrind, she recalled an old memory that she usually made sure to forget. It was a long time ago, not long after she was born, and back then she recalled witnessing Veldora on a rampage, looking very much like the great Veldanava himself. Veldora the Storm Dragon's key attribute was wind, but he also had control over space and water. He held sway over a tremendous number of magicules, second only to Veldanava's, and it was fair to call him a living, raging storm. He was the strongest on the planet, a natural disaster in himself, but his two sisters were just as unimaginable. Velgrind, with her heat-driven powers, bore the attribute of flame, making her the worst match possible for Veldora in a fight, and any difference between their magicule counts paled in comparison to the sheer overwhelming presence she projected. If anything though, she was still on the easy side. The real threat was Velzard, the leader of the trio. Her attribute was ice, although its essence was driven not by water but by something else. If anything, Velzard was using the abilities she governed to only pretend she was all about ice, then hoodwink the entire population at large. Ramirez was aware of this truth, something she had heard from Veldanava himself. Or she knew it at one point. But sadly, after reincarnating herself over the years, the memory had completely escaped her mind, not entirely, but regardless, it'd still take a while for Ramirez to dredge it up. That's why she was more than happy to be dealing with Velgrind right now. If this had been Velzard, Veldora never would have stood a chance. The way Ramirez remembered it, a single blow from Velzard's hand was enough to annihilate the storm dragon, and she recalled those icy cold eyes of hers, that cool, self-serving confidence that no other outcome could ever be possible. Thus, Ramirez's primary concern at the moment was for Veldora. She was flying in circles around the chamber, unable to calm down. "Will you be all right, Master?" Her voice was just as strained as her mind. But she posed the question as a sort of out for Veldora, a sign that she wouldn't berate him for fleeing. But Veldora ignored it. "Calm yourself. Just sit back and watch me act like the hero I am." Somehow, Veldora seemed to have lost all hints of anxiety. It was with a supreme self-assurance that he strode out of the labyrinth. The sight was nothing short of dazzling to Ramirez. She knew well how he used to act, and seeing him grow up like this was truly endearing to her. After Veldora set off to face Velgrind, Ramirez looked around, scanning the faces of those remaining in the control center. Cheris was there, explicitly told by Veldora that he couldn't join this fight. That much was a sad fact. Cheris had nothing against a heat-oriented fighter like Velgrind. Beretta was calm and collected as usual. He acted like nothing was amiss at all, which helped Ramirez chill a little as well. He was also in command of the Dryasdal Dryads, the creatures that had been reborn by Rimuru's hands. There were 24 of them now, curating the labyrinth under Beretta's supervision, and Rimuru had kept evolving them whenever he had a spare moment to stop by, so they had all become excellent managers. Trainee was also there, as well as her sisters, Tria and Doroth. They were all caring for Ramirez, their faces as calm and unaffected as normal. Beyond that, there were Vesta, Dino, and some recent additions to the research staff, Shinji Tanemura, Mark Lauren, and Zhen Liuxing, along with their 2 apprentice assistants, Lucius and Raymond. This quintet answered to Ghidorah once the labyrinth was in a state of war, but since Ghidorah wasn't on the premises, they were assisting Ramirez in the control center instead. All of them were now looking back at Ramirez, none hiding their apprehension. So she tried to sound as cheerful as possible. "Come on, guys. I'm not worried one bit. I'm sure my master will win, in fact, and even if he doesn't, Rimuru will figure something out. It's a no-brainer. And besides, as long as he doesn't let his guard down, my master is invincible." This was Ramirez's way of calming her own nerves. She was certain that Veldora and Rimuru would bring the serenity back to her life in short order. Then, just when everyone in the room had collected themselves a little, things began happening. Warning. Intruder. Alpha, the chief Dryad curator, shouted across the chamber. Everyone who heard it immediately shifted gears and went into battle mode. Display on the monitor. Beretta's order was followed by a split-screen display of the scene. Sighting the figure standing there, Ramirez involuntarily shouted out first. "Oh, that's an angel. He's been both physically incarnated and transformed, but I have a feeling he's gonna be trouble." It was a strange sight to see, an outfit of pure white and a god-class weapon that let out a dark, lustrous sheen. The long jet-black hair seemed to shine like a source of light, further accentuating the figure's beauty. Behind its back were 3 pairs of wings, which only made the figure more conspicuous. Estimated energy figures obtained. This. Alpha paused. "What? Tell us." Trainee's urging snapped him out of it. "This is just an estimate, but the figure on the forefront has more than 3 million existence points. The 5 behind him were all measured at between 4 and 700,000. Alpha's statement froze the entire control center. One less advertised role of the labyrinth was to quantify information on the life forms that lived within it, in order to build a database. The idea was to monitor the battles waged within its walls and use the gathered data for future crisis management purposes. That's what Alpha was referring to by existence points, or EP. It was a numerical statistic derived from a life form's magicule count and physical ability, plus the energy contained within whatever armor was equipped, although it didn't attempt to evaluate a target's actual combat ability. It was impossible to measure a person's honed skills and techniques, so one's EP was considered a reference value and little more, but it was still useful for statistical purposes. Used correctly, they expected it to help strengthen the labyrinth's defenses. It allowed them to estimate the approximate threat level of an enemy by hitting them with an opponent of roughly the same EP value. This was all still in the trial stage, however, and the program didn't yet have all the data they needed. Statistical anomalies still ran rampant across the system. For example, there were seasoned fighters like Hakuro, whose existence points were at around 60,000 but could still storm over foes with an EP several times that. An even more notable exception was Gobta, whose EP was just under 20,000, the weakest among those ranked in A in skill, but on the field he was stronger than Bovix and Equix, each given an EP of 130,000 or so. Given those cases, most everyone working in the labyrinth assumed that one's EP ought to be taken as a guide, not the final verdict on someone's strength. It should be noted that within the Land of Tempest, one's EP rating was also tied to their rank at the local free guild, to wit, EP, under 1000, guild rank, E, 1000 to 2999, D, 3000 to 5999, C, 6000 to 7999, B, 8000 to 8999, B+, 9000 to 9999, A+. 10,000 was an enormous wall for people to pass, but overcoming it brought you into the first class of strength. That earned you a guild rank of A and a threat level of hazard. Making it up to 100,000 though, that earned you a special A rank and the threat level of calamity. Demon Lords had an EP of at least 200,000, based on Rimuru's hunches. Frey Clayman, before his pseudo-awakening, would have had an EP of around 400,000. That figure was the yardstick for assigning someone the guild rank of S, along with the threat level of disaster. However, an S rank didn't mean a demon lord by Tempest standards, given how a lot of the nation's top executives were as powerful as old-style demon lords. The Tempest government wanted to keep things simpler, so they built their own standards beyond this point. That's where things like the catastrophe threat level came in, currently applied only to true dragons and Gi Crimson. Other, awakened, superpowers were assigned the class of Special S. The pseudo-awakened Clayman never stabilized his magicule count before reaching his end, but as Rimuru commented, I'd say his EP would have been around 700,000 or 800,000. Thus, Special S was defined as an EP of 800,000 or higher, and those lucky few with an EP over 1,000,000 were collectively referred to as the Million class. For the sake of reference, an archdemon's EP was always fixed at 140,000, no matter who summoned them. That number was uniformly the same for all of them, as if they had all reached some kind of cosmic upper limit. Even Testarossa and her friends were recorded as having a 140,000 EP when they first came onto the scene, and while there was no way to verify it at this point, Ramirez and her team were certain there was no mistake about it. A Million class member, said Ramirez, struggling to find the words. And if so, the first thing that comes to mind is that these are seraphim, aren't they? A high-level angel, a nodding Beretta added, who has transformed into one. Very troubling indeed. And even those following it are S-class. With our floor bosses asleep at the moment, engaging them could pose quite a challenge. But we have to do something, don't we? Ramirez replied, panicking a bit. Trainee offered her a smile, trying to assuage her. Yes, we do, Lady Ramirez. Allow me to set off. Trya and Doroth stood up, following her lead. As will I, of course. Allow me to join you, my sister. But this did little to calm Ramirez's nerves. In fact, she panicked even more. Whoa, wait a minute. I know you've all gotten stronger, sure, but there's no way you beat him in the stats. Hee. That will not be a problem. One's EP is nothing more than a guide, and now, we will prove just how strong your followers truly are. Trya and Doroth nodded their eager agreement. Ramirez really wanted to stop them, but nobody had any better ideas. They didn't, but she truly loved Trainee and her kin, and as their master, pushing them directly into harm's way like this didn't seem like an acceptable option at all. No, I can't allow this. Like Rimuru and my master always tell me, we only fight battles we know we can win. They would have to put the labyrinth in full operation and buy as much time as they could. In the meantime, Ramirez thought, they'd just have to hope things somehow got better. She knew that was escaping reality, but nothing else came to mind. But it was Cherries who admonished her. Lady Ramirez, I'm afraid a stalling approach will be too difficult to pull off. We cannot approach the level of the sleeping floor bosses in a fight, and if we leave things as they stand, we risk seeing the labyrinth's most vital facilities destroyed. I think the only choice is to intercept them on the surface. I will join them in this endeavor, so if you could grant me your permission. With Veldora absent, the strongest person in the control center was currently Cherries. That must have been why he was so determined to do something here. Lord Beretta, I entrust Lady Ramirez's protection to you. Very well. Protected she will remain. Beretta didn't need to be reminded. If the Dryads were setting out to battle, he was by default the only one who could keep Ramirez guarded. Shinji and the others, not wanting to be left behind, also spoke up. We'll do our best too. Ah, yes indeed. As long as we're being taken care of here, we need to return the favor. Yes. We have our resurrection bracelets, we can keep fighting through death itself. Yeah. Well, being an Imperial soldier, I have no reason to complain if I'm killed. I'd like to prove to everyone here that I'm more useful alive, at least. Right. Otherwise, Lord Ghidorah's likely to be enraged. So the atmosphere in the control center was relaxed, everyone pleasantly chatting as this mind-boggling foe loomed before them. Ramirez took a deep breath, then erupted into a big ol' smile. Well, if that's what you all saying, then have at it. Gimme everything you got. As long as I'm around, you can die all you want, so don't go easy, why here? And I'll send my dragon lords over when they're ready, so you better be sure you win for me. Everyone nodded their agreement, and then, taking up the roles they were given, they swiftly moved into action. The intruder whose presence Ramirez had picked up on was Zerario, the leader of the forces under the Mystic Lord Feldway's direct command. He was a former Seraphim, but with his two companions, he ruled as one of the three mystic leaders, the trio that controlled the mystics. Each of them served as an army commander leading a vast force of their own, and normally they'd be nowhere near the front lines. This time, however, Feldway had given him explicit orders. He was to take advantage of Velgrine's laying waste to the labyrinth and take out his assigned target at once. Feldway had told him what happened to the Imperial troops who had attacked the labyrinth before, and Zerario, reasoning that such a weak force would be nothing but a nuisance, decided that he ought to come to this labyrinth himself. 5 of his generals accompanied him. All of them were high-level angels, classified as cherubim or throne depending on rank, and by becoming mystics, they had gained magicule counts comparable to a demon lord's. Their physical bodies were much more fragile, but in the labyrinth's environment, that wasn't much of a problem, since the natural diffusion of magic force was suppressed down there, they'd all be able to fully leverage their abilities. So Zerario was casually strolling toward the labyrinth, but, of course, he was interrupted. As soon as he found the stairs and descended underground, he felt the physical space around him shift. He and his entourage paused a moment, not panicking but calmly looking around to see what was going on. What appeared before their eyes was a closed, empty space, around 8 figures in the center. Hehehe. Looks like we're being welcomed. Best be courteous to them, we don't want to be disrespectful. At Zerario's words, the generals under his command nodded silently. The two sides approached each other, stopping only when they were almost face to face. Trainee was the first to step forward. It is nice to meet all of you. My name is Trainee, and on behalf of Lady Ramirez, the master of this labyrinth, I will work with you, along with Cherries and my other associates. Now, with that in mind, I don't remember inviting anyone here, but may I ask who you are and what you want? She was smiling with her lips, but not at all with her eyes. She was ready to react to anything that might happen, keeping a constant lookout for her opponent's moves. Before coming here, she had powered herself up as much as possible. She could summon a wind elemental lord housed within her and make full use of its powers. Considering she had summoned only the high-level elemental Sylphide for her prolonged battle against Laplace earlier, Trainee was clearly pulling out all the stops from the first move. The EP of an elemental lord, based on its magicule count, was around 1 million. For Trainee, whose own EP didn't exceed 600,000, it was almost too much a weight to bear, but she was within the labyrinth and therefore able to be resurrected. So she was using up her full force for the upcoming fight, not worrying about any long-term effects on her body. Cherise, one step behind her, was just as revved up to fight. Even if his opponent had twice as many magicules, that wasn't going to faze him for a moment. He'd had the almighty Veldora in all his overwhelming glory as a training partner this whole time. He had friends here, people he could trust, even people like Gobta who could beat opponents several times more powerful than themselves. Thus, Cherise didn't doubt their victory for a moment. The same was true for the Dragon Lords. Rimuru had given them names as a reward, and they had now evolved into loyal servants of Ramirez. Their power gave them EP scores of around 70,000, and further experience could bring them into the special S level. Fear didn't register in their minds, they were just itching to test out their powers. Triya and Doroth had also completed their spiritual unification with Sylphide. Triya was assigned to work with the Dragon Lords against their enemies' entourage, while Doroth was providing support for Trainee and Cherise. Beretta's EP was about 400,000, but his skills far surpassed that. He was a valuable asset in battle, but as Ramirez's bodyguard, he couldn't leave her side. Thus, at the present moment, this was the best lineup the Labyrinth team could assemble. If this powerhouse team should be defeated, however, well, in that case, they'd have to stage a last stand with everyone else on hand, Rigard and Gobtachev among them. They were busy gathering their forces on the next highest labyrinth floor for just that purpose, and that's why they needed as much time as they could earn. Of course, nobody here was going up intending to lose. This is quite a surprise. I had heard that we wouldn't find much resistance left in the labyrinth, so I certainly wasn't expecting to see this gauntlet of worthy challengers. How fascinating. I'm quite excited, in fact. But allow me to introduce myself. My name is Zerario, one of the 3 mystic leaders entrusted with an army by the mystic lord Feldway. It is a pleasure. Zerario bowed gracefully, his movements refined, as if he were a famed stage actor. But there was no emotion at all behind his speech. He was clearly condescending to Trainee and the others, they barely even registered in his mind. It annoyed Trainee to no end, but she wasn't foolish enough to lose her temper at this point. Bravely trying to keep her composure, she continued with the conversation. I see. Zerario of the 3 mystic leaders? With all due respect, I'm not sure I've heard that name before. Zerario returned the muted provocation with a smile. No, I'm sure you haven't. We are rather well known over in other worlds, but we've been away from this one for a long while. I suppose we must seem like quite an alien presence here. Alien. Indeed. Not that we intend to let that stop us. Ah, right, but you asked what we wanted, yes? I'll gladly inform you, of course. In fact, if you could cooperate with us, I think it would save us all a lot of trouble. That will depend on what you have in mind. Very well, then. Our objection is to eliminate a boy by the name of Masayuki Honjo. If you will offer him to me instead of keeping him hidden, I will withdraw at once. What Zerario offered, his gentle good looks framing his soft, almost feminine voice, was a declaration that he'd kill Masayuki. Nobody was offering their agreement. Masayuki was Rimuru's friend, as well as an irreplaceable companion for Trainee and the rest. Ridiculous. I fear there is no room for negotiation. I see. That's a pity. Zorario smiled, not bothering to hide that he didn't find it a pity at all. Then, at the next moment, the fight began. Trainee set off first, propelling herself into the air. From above, she sent a swarm of countless unseen blades flying towards Zorario. This was Invisible Blade, a lethal move that couldn't be dodged. This was not just a blade-like rupture in the air caused by compression, but it was also granted the air elemental attribute, making it capable of shearing through dimensions. It was impossible to perceive and could be unleashed with no preliminary casting or other movement, showing just how menacing a force a riled trainee could be. But she was just mismatched this time. Far too mismatched. Zorario didn't take a single step, not because he failed to notice the blades but because he didn't even need to evade them. Just as the invisible blades seemed ready to slice through him, they disappeared. A distortion in space had manifested, neatly covering the surface of Zorario's body. There was a skill close to this one recorded in the Labyrinth's database. It was in the family of spatial defensive zones that Zijin was an expert at devising. Nothing could be more absolute in terms of defense. It could nullify all element-driven attacks and even handle ruptures in space. Wah. The same skill as Lord Zijin's, huh? Nasty. Ho. From the way you're talking, this skill isn't a novelty to you, then? And you spoke of a Zijin just now? I was told all of this nation's top leaders had been taken out of the picture, but it seems our intelligence was faulty. Despite Zorario's tone, his face was as cool as ever. He clearly wasn't taking any of them seriously yet. In fact, he appeared to savor this. That's why Trainee looked so stern. Exchanging glances with Cherries, she immediately changed her approach. Instead of trying to defeat Zorario by force, she concentrated on stalling for time. This seemed like a wise move. After all, the 5 generals Zorario had brought with him were having a noticeably difficult time against the labyrinthine forces. The Dragon Lords had been constantly training for battle, and now they were leaving nothing off the table skill-wise. Besides that, they were fighting on their home turf, which made all the Tempest forces as good as immortal. That let them fight well beyond their physical limits, and in an evenly matched battle, that allowed them to notch some scarily one-sided victories. This could work, Trainee thought. Zorario was a grave threat, but the other enemies would be dispatched soon enough. If they kept up their current momentum and worked as a team, a little space-distorting defense could be broken through in time. Worst-case scenario, they could just wait for Zorario to wear himself out. That's right. As long as we can keep driving them back, we'll achieve our objectives for victory here. No need to push ourselves too hard. But why is he acting so unconcerned about all of this? Trainee thought she should have a distinct advantage. But she couldn't shake off her uneasiness, all thanks to Zorario, whose attitude was unflappable as ever. Anyone with a decent amount of common sense wouldn't fail to read the war situation here, and Zorario had to have more than that. He said he was the general of an army. It'd normally be impossible for someone who had Demon Lord-level behemoths serving him to make such a rudimentary error in judgment. His mission is to eliminate Masayuki the hero. No. Thinking about it, if Masayuki was the only target, assassinating him would be easy. Zorario's sky-high EP had completely distracted them all from that possibility. Lady Ramirez. Do you know where Sir Masayuki is located? Huh? Why that out of nowhere? Of course I do. Ramirez quickly answered the thought communication. She wasn't just leisurely watching this battle. These intruders were a big problem, yes, but more important was evacuating the city residents. Now that Veldora had gone to battle, the urban area they had forcibly transported within the labyrinth was no longer fully safe. If Veldora should be defeated, the city would automatically revert to its original position. Ramirez alone didn't have enough magic power to keep it in place. There was nothing she could do if it happened. It was thus necessary to evacuate at least the residents, just in case. Fortunately, there was enough open space on floor 95, functioning as floor 100 at the moment, to deploy a decent-sized army. They couldn't allow regular citizens into the labyrinth's research facilities, but the floor overall was more than big enough for all the city's residents. Once Beretta pointed out that fact to Ramirez, she'd hurriedly sprung into action, and now the evacuation was underway. I need you to ensure he is safe immediately. I think you're worrying too much. Those are the only intruders so far, you know. Ramirez, despite her internal griping about how busy she was, answered Trainee's request. Just as she thought, Masayuki was safe and sound. Yep, he looks all right. He's in the city now, helping guide the evacuees out of there. Just as Ramirez said, Masayuki was playing a major role in the effort, helping to keep the citizens calm. If he wasn't there, there might have been enough mass panic to lethally delay the evacuation. It was times like these that Masayuki's innate skills really came into their own. So the situation down there was peaceful, with no signs of battle. If there were any signs, Ramirez, as the chief controller of the labyrinth, would know about it at once. Trainee, hearing all that, finally breathed a sigh of relief. All right. That's a relief, then, nonetheless, she seemed unconvinced. Are you worried? Ramirez asked her. Well, if the enemy tried taking Masayuki's life, I'm afraid the evacuees could get caught in the crossfire. Even Trainee felt this was overthinking matters. Nevertheless, something in the back of her mind was alerting her to consider every possibility just in case. Well, all right. If you're that insistent on it, Trainee, I'll have Masayuki's gang go up to floor 70. That, finally, satisfied Trainee. Floor 70 was currently home to the surviving remnants of the Imperial forces. Even if some assassins showed up, those soldiers would boast enough resistance to buy them some time. That would certainly put my mind at ease. Right? Yeah. So Masayuki was dispatched to floor 70. Masayuki sighed to himself. People around here treat me with no respect at all. From Rimuru on down, all the big shots just loved acting on the slightest whim that popped into their heads. These weren't ground-level minions, they really needed to consider their position and act with more caution. Not that all of them were like that, but... Don't you think, they should be more worried about my take on things, like how Shuna is? Those were Masayuki's true feelings coming out. If an elegant, beautiful woman like Shuna asked him to do something, Masayuki would have no complaints. That's why he was so delighted to help with this evacuation, but now Ramirez was interrupting him. Hey, so I want you up on floor 70 ASAP, she forcefully ordered without a moment's hesitation. Masayuki was less than excited about this. But despite appearances, Ramirez had a lot of power to work with. She had Veldora's backing, and she was also one of the people who knew Masayuki's secret. No matter what she said, there was no way he could defy her. Give it up. Lady Ramirez doesn't mean anything bad by it, they're just stretched thin is all. Sir Veldora himself went out to fight too. It's an emergency no matter how you slice it. The young man speaking to Masayuki, walking along with him, wore a snake-shaped earring, a rugged-looking wristwatch, and a skull ring on his finger. His shirt was a sickly-looking shade of purple, covered by a spiked leather jacket. This was matched with long, shiny black leather pants, accompanied by a skirt-like piece of fabric around the waist. It was punk fashion through and through. Clearly this guy wasn't an honor student. This wasn't the type Masayuki usually got along with, but strangely enough, they had hit it off pretty well. That was probably because, much like Masayuki, this man had gone through a lot in life. He called himself Venom, and according to him, he was always being forced by his bosses to deliver the impossible in his work. Masayuki felt a kind of kinship with him, because he saw a lot of himself in the guy. As Venom had rather succinctly put it, I have no human rights. Now Masayuki had Venom as his bodyguard, because that's what Venom's bosses had ordered him to do. He hadn't seen Jiwoo or Bernie since all that stuff went down, it'd just be too awkward, and he and Jinrai had split up as well. That was at Masayuki's suggestion. He knew his entire life was one big bluff, so there was no way he could ensure his pal's safety. Fortunately, Jinrai was open to the idea. If you need me, he'd told Masayuki, just say the word. Until then, I'll keep my skills sharp working for this nation's guild. So now he was employed by Tempest's guild, providing behind-the-scenes support for Masayuki's exploits. It made the hero feel a tad lonely, but it still came as a relief. Now that he didn't have to lie to his own friends, a heavy guilt was lifted from his shoulders. So Masayuki had been by himself, and then Venom showed up. Venom knew just how weak Masayuki was. He was there to protect him, and despite appearances, he actually lent an ear to what he had to say. Venom had been told to cooperate with Masayuki so his reputation didn't get tarnished, which was in line with what Rimuru wanted as well, and Masayuki wasn't shy about taking advantage. Thanks to that, they had quickly built a friendship based on trust. Yeah, so I know this is an emergency and all, but why would someone portraying a hero figure like me try to actively run away from everyone in town, is what I'm asking. But you're a wimp, man. If the enemy really attacks, you can't do squat, can you? No, but... Yes, I know that. But that doesn't make this right, does it? All those anxious gazes upon me. They bite into me, you know? They didn't have to say anything. Masayuki could hear them pleading with him, don't go, anyway. That's why he was so dissatisfied with Ramirez's order. In Venom's eyes though, the issue lay elsewhere. Floor 70 was clearly going to be safer than Floor 100. That's because even if you didn't count the Imperial forces among their war power, the research facilities on Floor 70 had the Overcomer vampires waiting in the wings. They were currently taking care of the children, so the way Venom saw it, Masayuki could come under their protection once he got there. To Venom, the mission Diablo gave him was the most important matter at hand. He needed to literally risk his life to ensure Masayuki survived. Yeah, well, I know how you're just being there helps people feel better. But the evacuations are pretty close to complete now, and Floor 100's well protected, so... Practically speaking, if an enemy was powerful enough to make it this far, nothing short of the floor bosses would stop them. Floor 60 was largely undefended, Ghidorah was absent, and Shinji's team had pulled out. Floor 70 was thus serving as their first line of defense. So you mean I'd be in more danger up there? Venom nodded. I suppose so. But don't worry, man. I'm here. And it's my job to protect you. Well, that's what I'm hoping for, but... Masayuki understood the situation he was in. If he was being transferred to the front lines in this situation, it meant some enemy was likely targeting him and him alone. Otherwise there'd be no reason for Ramirez to expose someone Ashelplus as he was to even more danger. Masayuki had a resurrection bracelet, so he'd be quickly resurrected after any death in the labyrinth. It seemed clear Ramirez wanted to use him as bait for the enemy. Yeah, you're probably right. Plus, I'm sure she didn't want to get other civilians caught in the fight. They might realize how much of a wimp you are, besides. Following this order is just the right thing to do, you know? I know that, yeah, but I got my say in this too. Jiwoo and Bernie were on Floor 70. The awkwardness of running into them was a problem for Masayuki as well. I dunno what they're up to, but if they were just following orders, try not to hate on them too much, okay? Even if they tried to kill you, it's not like they really wanted to, deep down. Humans are all complicated like that, it's not like monsters. That's what makes them such great toys for demons. Masayuki glared at the grinning Venom. I can't move on that easily, he thought, but as Venom said, it was hard to read someone's true feelings, and not even he could find it in himself to fully hate Jiwoo and Bernie. Dwelling on it would only hurt him. So Masayuki finally resigned himself to his fate once they reached Floor 70 and he witnessed the construction site the Imperial forces were stationed around. Well, stop using me as a toy too, he shot at his newfound friend, shaking his head to drive away his emotions. Venom smiled, knowing he wasn't actually angry. Protecting Masayuki was his duty, but Venom took a personal liking to him as well. They were both nervous pessimists by nature. And Venom couldn't help but respect the guy. He might seem like a twig in a river, letting the currents take him where they would, but he still kept a fierce sense of self-will. Venom saw himself as a natural-born rebel as well, but something told him he couldn't hold a candle to Masayuki. Ha 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 ha. Well, that depends on you, Just as he was about to jab at him in return, he stepped up to defend Masayuki against the presence that suddenly appeared before them. Who the hell are you? Ch. A meddler, huh? And I thought my timing was perfect. I'm not used to this body enough to react quickly then? The figure ignored Venom, giving Masayuki an annoyed look instead. There was something clearly unearthly about him, something Masayuki couldn't hide his agitation about. There had been no sign of him at all before that moment, but now the aura he emitted was nothing short of overwhelming. On his back were 3 pairs of folded wings, only serving to further emphasize his virile, masculine physique. The well-defined muscles were virtually chiseled into his pale skin, exposed for the world to see. But what struck observers the most was his gaze. It housed a sinister, ghastly light, like a vicious carnivore, and a wounded one at that, something no one could ever approach. Don't ignore me, Venom shouted as he unleashed a high roundhouse kick. It was a beautiful, textbook move, and it traveled toward the target's temple like a magnet. But Masayuki was shocked. Amazingly, the figure took Venom's kick without defending, not because he couldn't react in time either. Almost as if he didn't see the need to at all. Pfft, garbage like you doesn't deserve to live. You damn demon races have been meddling with us since time immemorial. I am Cornu, one of the 3 mystic leaders, and you have just deeply offended me. You will know your place soon, in the grave. The man called Cornu casually swung an arm toward Venom. The next moment, a wave of compressed magic force was unleashed, gouging into Venom at an unavoidable speed. Masayuki was wondering why Cornu had bothered with the high-handed self-introduction, but only for a moment, as he hurriedly went over to Venom's side. Are you okay? Venom was alive. He had reacted just in time to deflect the magic bolt with his left arm. But the damage was staggering. His entire left arm was now gone, and there was a large hole in his left side as well. Not really, no. I hardly believe it, much less want to admit it, but it looks like that bastard's way stronger than I am. But don't worry. I promise I'm gonna protect you. With that, Venom casually stood up. He was nowhere near unhurt, but he was far from out of the battle either. Oh, great. We've got an obstinate little bug here, don't we? This is why I hate garbage so much. They waste everyone's time with their pointless resistance. Watching Cornu moan about this made Masayuki want to tell him off. He didn't know why it was so important that he be killed, and he felt entirely responsible for Venom getting hurt as well. Venom. I guess that guy's going after you, huh? You knew from the start? I had a hunch once Lady Ramirez contacted me. But it's okay. I may not beat him, but I'll buy us some time. But he probably hasn't killed you yet because of your bracelet. If he does, you'll just get resurrected somewhere else. He's afraid of that, so he's trying to bring you out of the labyrinth alive. I don't think he'll throw us any attacks that might fall within range of you. Venom smiled defiantly. And he was right. Masayuki's resurrection point was set to the control center. That way, no one would see where he went. Knowing that emboldened him. Cornu, meanwhile, was annoyed that his motives had been exposed. He had good reason not to make any more mistakes, a reason that went back several decades. During an attempted invasion of another planet besides this one, he'd screwed everything up just one step before completion. Exactly what had happened was unclear, but a field of blazing fire had reduced the army he led to cinders. Thanks to that, Cornu, despite retaining his mystic leader title, no longer had any subordinates assigned to him. And while his wounds had healed, his mind still bore the sadness and despair he could never fully wipe away. Thus, despite the overwhelming advantage he had in this matchup, Cornu still felt like he was dancing on a cliff. Unfortunately for him, it didn't escape his adversary's notice. I'll admit it. If this wasn't Ramirez's world, I never would have had to be here. It would be child's play to bury both of you, but while I'm at it, I think I'll let you taste genuine despair. Behold my true powers, and prepare to set off for the afterlife. Cornu wasn't the type of fool to let his guard down. He realized Venom would be no pushover, and now he broke out his full force so he could handle whatever may or may not come. Over his body, a suit of armor formed itself, emitting beams of black and golden light. This was the ultimate in God-class gear, the same type Zorario boasted, and it was available only to the 3 mystic leaders. Venom, now facing a fully armed Cornu, had no moves left to make. No attack would even scratch him, and all that remained was for Venom to be tormented to death. Damn it. Venom winced at the impossible difference in power. Running, he assumed, would be pointless, and once he was gone, Masayuki would doubtlessly be taken away and executed. Venom himself would be resurrected within this labyrinth as well, but if he failed to protect Masayuki, it'd be Diablo's violent purge waiting for him next. I'm screwed, aren't I? Venom thought hard, almost ready to cry. There was only one option left, kill Masayuki himself so he'd be sent to a safe spot. So be it. But just when Venom was about to commit to it. Hey, do we have some trouble over here? Mind if we lend a hand? 2 men stepped forward, shielding Masayuki. Are you Sir Minutes? And Sir Caligulio too? The timid Masayuki recognized them, having met them both a couple of times before. He recalled how nervous he had been, given how high in Empire society they both were. Sir Masayuki, you may feel free to simply call me Minutes. Having His Majesty the Emperor's spitting image call me, Sir, makes me feel so self-conscious. But, he. He's right, I think. Seeing you here, Sir Masayuki, makes me feel like my heart is soaring, as if His Majesty himself is witnessing my exploits. I feel more powerful than ever now. The foppish Minutes, along with Caligulio, his stern countenance obscured by a patch over his left eye, smiled at Masayuki, trying to calm him. Venom, right? Allow us to back you up. Minutes turned toward Cornu. An invisible force field deployed itself, slowing Cornu's movements. It was the effect of Oppressor, the unique skill Minutes had supposedly lost earlier. Didn't you lose your powers, Minutes? Yes, I did, came the blunt reply. But once you get something the first time, the second time onward is far easier, isn't it? Caligulio gave that a half smile. I'm envious. I lost my omnipotence, so. But at least I can still easily store magicules in my empty body. As if to prove it, Caligulio's body was clearly teeming with power. He was well beyond the point of losing control, and blood was seeping out from his pores. His life would be in danger before long, but that mattered little in the labyrinth. He was equipped with an unlimited use resurrection bracelet he had procured from parts unknown, so he didn't care about the effect on his body. You sure get carried away, don't you? I couldn't face up to my dead soldiers if I didn't do this much. Venom saw his last hope in the 2 of them. And they weren't alone. Several other men had joined them, volunteering to assist the demon. He recognized who they were immediately, and without a moment's hesitation, he agreed to the offer. Thanks, guys. Don't worry about killing this one or anything, just stop him. Understood. This ought to be fun. As long as I'm on the scene, there's nothing left to fear. These were 3 overcomers, rehabilitated vampires, who had joined in out of curiosity. I'll give the orders. All of you, get moving. It was Caligulio declaring his authority, and no one objected. Now 5 people were supporting Venom, going on the attack against Cornu. Stupid garbage. Don't act like you can beat me. Cornu was enraged, but he still hadn't lost his cool. He set out to eliminate each of them one by one, while taking pains not to let Masayuki escape. But, surprisingly enough, this hastily assembled team worked amazingly well together. Between the Overcomer's immortality and Cornu being unable to deploy wide-range destructive attacks, Caligulio had a plan in mind to win this battle with minimal damage. Using quick-wittedness and bravery to overcome the impossible difference in power, Venom and the others backed one another up to successfully stall for time. And as they did, Masayuki. Over here. Hurry up and get out of there. If you reach the lab, you can travel to other floors from there, right? Bernie and Jiwoo had called out to him. Why you guys? Sorry. I wanted to more formally apologize, but now's not the time for that. Just follow me. Huh? Wait a second. What are you doing, Jiwoo? Bernie seemed ready to serve as Masayuki's bodyguard. Jiwoo, however, stood frozen on the spot, apparently casting a magic spell. Don't worry about me. I'll just pretend to be you to confuse him. By the time Jiwoo turned toward Masayuki to respond, she looked exactly like him. Come on. I guess he's holding back his attack on you, and Jiwoo can defend herself well enough. We gotta get out while we have a chance. That was apparently the plan they had come up with on the way here. The rest of the team endeavored to keep Jiwoo out of Cornu's sight as she transformed. Masayuki hesitated, but only for a moment. Okay. I'm just gonna be a drag on everyone here anyway. So he reluctantly agreed to the plan. The control center was in a state of uncontrolled chaos. The enemy who had appeared in the labyrinth out of nowhere was far trickier to deal with than anyone had assumed. Do we have the EP for the guy targeting Masayuki yet? Here it is. It's estimated to be around 1.8 million, or it was, but after equipping God-class gear, it's risen to 2.8 million. What? That's just cheating. Ramirez deeply resented Alpha's report. But there wasn't much point whining about it. She needed to get serious and come up with a plan, fast. God-class equipment only lends its force to whoever it deems its master. In Sir Alberto's case, the result more than doubled his existence points, and even then, he was likely not extracting his God-class gear's full power. Ramirez agreed with Beretta's analysis. With his God-class armor, Alberto had become something equivalent to a spiritual life form. According to the data taken earlier, his EP went from a starting point of around 180,000 to 400,000 and beyond. That seemed impressive by itself, but apparently there was still untapped power left in his God-class gear. Alberto himself had gone into his evolutionary sleep not long afterward, and no one could wait to see what he'd exhibit once he woke up. This evoked the question of just how crazy Kurobe was, given his ability to craft God-class stuff, but no one had any time to debate that right then. Regardless, God-class gear was as rare as it was astounding, except in the hands of the enemy, it was nothing but a mortal threat. So now what are we gonna do, huh? Even Trainee and Cherries together are getting pushed around by that Zerario guy. If we gotta deal with this Cornu character along with that, Venom and his friends don't stand a chance. Ramirez had reason for concern. Having become a demon peer, Venom's EP had shot up to 400,000. However, the leader of the Overcomer trio was 300,000 at best, and his 2 partners were 200,000. Minutes and Caligulio, both stragglers from the Imperial Army, had lost most of their powers. They could manage an EP of just over 10,000. Expecting them to put up a fight was foolish. In fact, one had to commend their bravery for attempting to join in at all. Still, the pair was brimming with enthusiasm. Minutes, oddly enough, was using his unique skill, Oppressor, something everyone assumed he had lost. The fashionable suit he sported was another concern. He sure didn't look like a prisoner of war, but Ramirez's mind was more on Oppressor at the moment. Caligulio's own EP had also been rapidly rising as of late, topping 400,000 just a moment ago. The rate of acceleration was finally tapering off, but the number was still increasing. It was totally incomprehensible and tremendously fascinating to watch. But unfortunately, there was no time to explore it further. Suppressing her bewilderment at all these concerns happening at once, Ramirez barked out her orders. Duh. If they did, my power will just resurrect them anyway. They can act as my throwaway pawns all they want. The real problem is Masayuki. How do you mean? I mean, he'll be transported back here if he dies, but if he's taken away, it's over for him. Right? So I think we need the surest method possible to ferry him back to safety. I see. Actually, it looks like Bernie and Jiwoo are trying to extricate him from the scene. Oh. Ramirez was impressed. They had acted before she could direct them, apparently reaching the same conclusion she had. It did a lot to rehabilitate their image in her mind. Masayuki, she knew, was way too much of a chicken to try something like take his own life in the labyrinth. No matter how bad things got, he'd never even think about using that most deadly approach to escape. With Bernie there, however, Ramirez's mind was much more at ease. Get in contact with Bernie. Tell him to flee back to this room for me. Also, I think he knows this, but if push comes to shove, he needs to off the guy himself. Roger that. Alpha promptly sent a thought communication, perfectly encrypted and reaching Bernie with zero delay. Confirming that, Ramirez finally breathed a sigh of relief. All right. Now we've done what we can, at least. The large surveillance screen was divided into sections, showing off the state of battle across the labyrinth. The fight was tough in every video feed, things weren't looking too sunny for them. Ugh, I am so useless when Rimuru isn't around. It was the worst possible timing. If our floor guardians were awake, we wouldn't be nearly as outmanned as we are. Well, I know that, but... Beretta was certainly right. If their entire lineup was deployable right now, they wouldn't be so far behind in this fight. But even so, Ramirez felt a sense of responsibility as she watched things unfold. That was how irreplaceable the labyrinth had become in her life. Just then, Beta, who had been monitoring magicule amounts, shouted out in a strained voice. Emergency. Oh, now what? This was anticipated, but the magicule supply from Sir Veldora has been cut off. Unless it's restored, we have less than an hour until the city is deposited back on the surface. Gahe? Does that mean my master lost? It was a hard reality for Ramirez to swallow. But if Velgrind was their adversary, it was a reality she had to admit was possible. They had proceeded with the evacuation with that possibility in mind. For now, Ramirez opted to believe that Rimuru would figure something out for Veldora. Getting impressed wouldn't improve matters for anyone, so all she could do was think positively and proceed as best she could. How's the evacuation going? No problems there. Masayuki successfully persuaded the stragglers before he headed out. In any crowd of people, there's always one group that's good at griping about anything and everything, and the Tempest capital of Rimuru was no exception. Around 10% of the population had refused to evacuate, including residents and visiting merchants trying to profit off the situation. But even they were swayed by the voice of Masayuki. Well, they said, if that's what he wants, and then they finally got off their asses and left. The effect, close to brainwashing, startled even Ramirez. Gamma, tasked with overseeing evacuation-related matters, avowed that there was nobody left in the city. Her mind assured, Ramirez prepared to separate the city from the labyrinth. But if nobody's there, none of our defenses will function. Sadly, we will have to expect untold damage to the town and its buildings. Whoa, Beretta. You're gonna make me second-guess things if you say stuff like that. But it was the unavoidable truth. Ramirez's own magicule count wouldn't comparatively amount to much, although the labyrinth had been expanded, she didn't have the wherewithal to accommodate any extra structures inside it by herself. That was the harmful side effect of relying purely on Veldora for their energy needs, and Ramirez sure didn't have a quick fix for it right now. I am fully aware of that, my lady. But then, I am sure Sir Rimuru would say something to the effect of, we can always build it again, right? I suppose that's what we'll have to commit to. Seething over her own lack of power, Ramirez ejected the city to the surface. Now they just have to pray some stray bolt of magic didn't level the thing. But... Urgent report. A new enemy has appeared on the surface, 2 in number. Precision measurements outside the labyrinth are not possible, but their EP is estimated to be at least 1 million. The report came from Delta, who was monitoring the surface. The small window on the main screen was enlarged, revealing 2 angels, or fallen angels, to be exact, bearing black wings. One was a large, muscular woman while the other was a smaller, handsome young man. Each of them sported 3 pairs of wings. Oh, no way. If they have the same number of wings, are they seraphim too? Ramirez flew around the room, fidgeting. All hope seemed to be truly lost now. But, remembering something that was on her mind, she turned to Delta, a glimmer of hope on her face. Delta. How can we be so sure they're enemies? Maybe they're not, she thought. Maybe they're allies, even. But Delta offered no solace. Because they are keeping us from covering the hole opened up by Lady Velgrind. Victory is ours if we can close off the labyrinth, but sadly, it is not to be. The answer was obvious, beyond reproach. Right. Thank you. Ramirez stopped flitting around in the air and slumped onto Beretta's shoulder. There was something obscene about the enemy deciding to put 4 of the million class into the field. She wanted to spend all night cursing to high heaven about it. But then a reliable ally woke back up. Allow me to handle things on the surface. I will not let them destroy the city crowned by Sir Rimuru's name without a fight. Geld, the barrier lord, had completed his evolution. Geld. Ramirez was crying. Geld's EP is over 2.37 million, said Alpha. All his gear is included in that, but even so, it's doubtful he'll lose to these invaders now. Geld's legend class equipment had itself ascended to god class with the evolution, driven to greater heights by Geld's aura. Rimuru hadn't factored that into his calculations, but everyone witnessing this assumed he'd expected this to happen. That's Rimuru for ya. Even with my own 2 eyes, I could never have seen this one coming. Ramirez was bodily confident about how imperceptive she was. Beretta couldn't have agreed more. Indeed. Such deep forethought. And that wasn't the only one awakening. I am here as well. Let me handle the other one. This was Kamara, the Chimera Lord. Lady Kamara's EP is measured at approximately 1.9 million. Reaching this figure with no auxiliary equipment is simply unbelievable. Cheers erupted in the control center at Alpha's report. Then, as if to prove his statement true, an intense battle broke out on the surface. Even more amazingly, Geld's underlings fanned out across key areas, forming an all-powerful barrier to protect the city from any of the battle's fallout. We can win this. For now, I'd say we have a chance. Ramirez was already declaring victory. Beretta was similarly relieved. But it was too early to rest easy yet. Feldway, the Mystic Lord, had yet to fully execute his strategy. In fact, everything up to now had been a feint. His true aim was elsewhere. The nervous tension spread across the control center had subsided a little. Ramirez, declaring victory atop Beretta's shoulder, was quieter now, like she needed a nap. Beretta, used to his role, kept his calm demeanor as he tended to his ever-frantic master. Shinji, watching this from a distance, had been taking in all the previous chaos like he was a spectator at a sports meet. The battle unfolding was so completely beyond his understanding that it seemed to transcend the limits of reality itself. Paradoxically, it helped him stay calm. He understood why Ramirez was freaking out, but, really, she should collect herself a bit more, he thought. I wish she'd learn a little from Beretta. That's what he truly felt, but he'd never say it out loud. If he did, it'd lead to needless strife and likely a pay cut. Yes, Ramirez's labyrinth was truly a mind-boggling invention, but she herself was weaker than Shinji, weak beyond compare, even. No matter how much she panicked and carried on in here, she couldn't actually do very much. Besides, Shinji recalled the victory celebration held the other day. All those magic-born titans, boasting untold stores of power, and they each pledged their loyalty to one man, the demon lord Rimuru. Shinji was an otherworlder, a capable one, rated Special A by the Free Guild. He had something called his existence points measured, and right now it was more than 120,000. He even possessed the unique skill Restorer. In the Imperial Army, he was treated as an ace commando, and he admittedly allowed his superiority to get to his head a little. Here though, he was nothing special. Even the beautiful sisters manning the operator controls had EPs of more than 150,000. It quickly, and understandably, made Shinji stop dwelling on his own strength so much. Furthermore, Mark's EP was pegged at 130,000, while Jin scored 120,000. They seemed pretty equal overall, and none of them would even register in the minds of the monsters being shown on screen here. But despite that, even with Tempest's main force unavailable, they were still making a competitive fight out of this. That alone, Shinji thought, was amazing. Looking back, the force that laid waste to the Empire's proud armored division was not even 30% of the Tempest force's full power. That too was before the victory party where the demon lord Rimuru rewarded his top magic-born officers and they fell into evolutionary sleep. Now they were seeing guys graduate into the million class. Shinji's mind could barely keep up with this. Monster evolutions, including Geld's just now, made no sense to him. I am so glad that I left the Empire for Tempest. He gave a sincere mental thank you to Lord Ghidorah. Then his eyes moved to the monitor, where his former commanding officer, Minutes, was leading a group fighting off Cornu, one of the three mystic leaders. It looked like something from a movie. I mean, what can they even do against these kinds of monsters? I can't believe freaks like that are up there in the first place. In Shinji's mind, Minutes and Caligulio must be insane if they were charging into battle despite losing all their power. He wondered if they were scared, but seeing this movie-like plot of two fallen warriors charging back up against their foes made him think that not everyone in the Empire's officer corps was a waste of space. It just felt so unrealistic. So much so, he wondered if these two thought they were the heroes of their own little movie plots or something. And that was perhaps why his mind wandered away from the danger at hand to escape reality. Now his attention was focused on Shuna, who was busy providing refreshments to everyone. But, man, Shuna's just as sweet as always, huh? There was no point dwelling on his employer, she didn't matter to him. This vulgar fighting didn't occupy his mind, instead, it was all about the incredibly fetching Shuna. Just recalling her as she politely bowed and left the room made Shinji feel happier. She was so dignified, so flawless. She looked like such a fleeting figure, who would fade into the wind if you touched her, but she was notorious for being a scary woman when riled. Shinji was hardly the only one who looked up to her. Mark and Jin were fellow members of Shuna's fan club, alongside the new recruits Lucius and Raymond. On the other hand, there was Ramirez, his employer. He sighed. Shinji, she said. If you wanted to say something, I'll hear you out, but... She was so keenly sharp only when it came to stuff like this. No, it's nothing. Shinji hurriedly denied it, wondering if it was showing on his face. Lord Ghidorah, his master, told him all the time that, if you want to be a wizard, you must always keep your presence of mind. You've got much to learn there, my boy. Now he could see the wisdom in that. Yes, Shinji could get emotional by comparison, and he was poor at the type of self-control that all wizards needed. Jin always kept it cool, never revealing how he felt, but he wasn't suited to magic. Too bad it wasn't the other way around, Ghidorah always told him, and now Shinji had to admit to his shortcomings. Well, if Lady Ramirez is unoccupied enough to yell at me again, maybe she'll forgive me for it this time. He knew he was dreaming. Besides, comparing Shuna with Ramirez was ridiculous from the start. It was like comparing a grown woman to a child, or not even that. Shuna still exhibited traits of innocent youth, but the way she held herself was as a truly refined woman. Ramirez had been alive for millennia, but her mental age was still as low as her physical bodies. She was a kid, in looks and in mind, and she couldn't even compete in the same arena as Shuna. The juxtaposition was so stark, Shinji even felt a little bad for Ramirez. Shinji's mind was far away from pressing matters. And that's why he could notice. One man among them, usually too lazy to lift a finger, had stood up from his seat, and Vesta, his dedicated boss, was sprawled over his desk, fast asleep. Oh. Dino, what are you doing? It was sheer coincidence that Shinji posed the question, but it turned out to be the MVP performance of the day. Shinji, the least dedicated to this war of anyone in the room, wound up contributing more to it than anyone else. Dino stood up and attempted to carry out the duty handed to him. It was with a great deal of reluctance, given how much he hated working, but an old acquaintance of his had asked for it, and he couldn't turn him down. Besides, he had been taken by the compulsive idea that he had to do it. But something unexpected got in the way. Oh. Dino, what are you doing? The moment he heard Shinji's voice, Dino realized his mission had failed. He had intended to get everything over with before anyone could notice, but the exact right kind of interference showed up at the exact right time. It was a colossal blunder. No one could have ever predicted this act from Dino, either. The hand that had reached out to grab Ramirez was now caught in Beretta's iron grip. It all happened in a single moment. If Shinji hadn't spoken up, nothing would have stopped him. What are you trying to do, Sir Dino? That's a surprise. I didn't expect anyone to get in the way. Eesh. I was waiting for everyone to relax and stop being so tense because you were around too. Seriously, Shinji, you really got a lot of potential, you know? You could be big. Dino was griping, but he half meant it as well. He knew only a handful of people in the world could spot his moves. That was why he'd had so much confidence this would work, confidence that was fully shot now. Rolling his eyes, Dino sighed and stole a glance at Shinji. Then he shook his head and looked back, sneering at Beretta. By now, people around Shinji were seeing the weight of the situation, but there wasn't much they could do. Alpha and the other dryads stepped up to surround Dino, ferrying Ramirez away from Beretta's shoulder and into their protection. Huh. Ramirez, left behind by these transpiring events, looked at Beretta, then Dino, trying bravely to understand her predicament. Shinji stepped away from Dino to attend to Vesta, but Mark and his other friends were just crouched over in their seats, not moving. They were asleep as well, despite everything going on, and now everyone could tell something was wrong. Hey! Dino! Shinji shouted. You did something, didn't you? Yeah, kinda, came the listless reply. But, if you got resistance to my power, you must have a pretty excellent skill there. You caught me off guard, Shinji. I'm not exactly happy about the compliment. He actually was a little happy, but Shinji didn't say that. Dino merely shrugged. He'd offered Shinji praise, but otherwise he didn't seem to care about him much, because he didn't even offer him another look. Instead, his eyes were on Ramirez, behind Beretta's shoulder. Ramirez, sorry about this, but you think you could maybe work with my team? I don't want to get rough, and if you agree to help us, I promise I'll treat you well. Neither of us wants to shed needless blood, right? So, you mind coming with me? It was about as serious a statement as Dino had ever delivered. Ramirez's reaction to it was predictable. Huh? Have you gone loony or what? Rimuru's gonna beat your ass silly once he gets back, you know. Ramirez was always keen to rely on someone else's reputation to defend herself. But she wasn't wrong, either. Dino had to chuckle. Yeah, I'm sure. I figured you'd say that. But, you know, I'm not just gonna sit here and accept that. I'm reluctant to do this, like, a lot, but I'm a monitor and all, so. A monitor. You mean one of the 7 primordial angels, the closest servants of Sir Veldanava? Well said. And yes, I used to be one of those primordials. Ever since Feldway and the other leaders left for that alternate world, I've been taking care of monitoring activity in their place. Oh, no way. No, I mean it. This was a sheer bolt out of the blue for Ramirez. Dino, a demon lord who even he himself admitted was mostly baggage, actually turned out to be someone important, in fact, someone named by Veldanava himself, the creator. Ramirez never saw it coming. Veldanava had also named Ramirez, but after reincarnating herself too many times, she had wholly forgotten that fact. It would pop back into her memory once she attained her complete form, but when that would be was anybody's guess. I mean, I thought the primordials all went over to the other world. Of course not, man. Once the surface world was repressed and everything was peaceful again, Sir Veldanava wanted that other world to become stable for him. You know that. Oh. Well, yes, but. Ramirez was acting a little strange, but Dino brushed it off. Pursuing it would just cause more strife for him, and trying to explain it all was even more of a pain. So he continued, assuming Ramirez knew the whole story. So Feldway and 3 other primordial angels were assigned to do that. Which left the other 3, me included, to handle things here. We're serving as Sir Veldanava's boots on the ground. You included? Yeah, I get it if you don't believe me, but I used to treat the job really seriously at one point. But then some stuff happened, and I went from a seraphim to a fallen angel, that sort of thing. My partners are kind of the same way too, so there's no pure, primordial angel left any longer, actually. Whoa, hey, you're forgetting the most important part. I want to find out what kind of stuff happened. That's more important than anything. Ramirez's patience was clearly wearing thin. Dino just sullenly sighed. Look, stop, all right? It's too much of a pain to explain it. That stuff doesn't matter to me anyway. Just use your imagination to fill in the blanks, okay? For now, I want to bargain with you. Don't make us fill in the blanks, thought everybody in the room at once. But Dino's indolence was world-renowned by now. There was no point, everyone knew, in asking him to explain himself, so they just gave up and listened to Dino's demands. So what do you want, huh? Ramirez asked, speaking for the group. Like, what I just said. If Ramirez will work with us, I swear we won't lay a finger on anyone in this labyrinth. If you refuse, well, my hands are tied. I'll have to take you away, and I'll kill everyone in my way if I have to. You think I'm gonna say yes to that after what you did? Nah, I guess not. But really, that's not a problem at all. Ideally, you'll want to work with us, but if it comes to it, I've been told they'll let this go if you shut down the labyrinth. That's what you want, huh? Who gave you those orders? I dunno if I can tell you. I mean, it'd take someone like Guy, essentially, if you'll actually listen to someone's orders. Yeah, well, I dunno about that, you know? Guy and I are appointed to the same post, kind of. Why would I need to listen to his? That doesn't matter. It does to me. Ramirez, ignoring Dino's rantings, thought for a moment. If it's not Guy. I know. It's Feldway, the primordial angel leader, isn't it? He came back from that other world and caught up with you while you were bumbling around, I bet. And you couldn't say no to him, right? Like a broken wall clock, Ramirez's deduction skills were right only sometimes. She would make all these incorrect assumptions and observations, then somehow use them to reach the right answer in the end, and this was one of those times. Wow. You're right. Feldway had deployed numerous people for this plan, waiting for just the right moment to step forward. He had two goals in mind: 1, assassinate Masayuki, and 2, destroy the labyrinth. Trying to conquer the labyrinth by force would be a gargantuan endeavor, one likely to falter and damage the plan in unpredictable ways. To prevent that, Feldway thought that capturing Ramirez first was vital. It was Feldway's aim to eliminate all potential random elements, and that's what led to this strategy. Dino was just helping execute it. And you're a real punk, I know, so you've had a falling out with Feldway, right? He's a smart man, so I'm sure you guys never got along to start with. Hey. I'm not a punk. I just procrastinate a lot sometimes, is all. But yeah, I hate it when he orders me around like he's my mom or something, so having him off the planet's been a huge weight off my chest. As Dino explained, they had fallen out of contact for a long time, but they still maintained an acquaintance. So the attackers this time are the primordial angels? That's, like, terrible news for us. Come on, Dino. Stab Feldway in the back for me and join our side again. It was a pretty outlandish offer from Ramirez, an act even Dino found all too charming. But he couldn't agree to it. Well, it's a sad thing, I know, but I got my stuff to deal with. Dino found it impossible to defy Feldway's will, for reasons he had some difficulty articulating. That was why he didn't hesitate to turn her down. Boy, I guess you're serious about this, huh? You sure got guts. All right, then, I'll take you on. I'm part of the Octagram, I'll remind ya, and I'm ready to protect this place until Rimuru comes back. Her mind was made up. Yeah. I really don't want to have to work for this, you know. Ideally, I'd like to live in a world where I could get 3 hot meals a day doing nothing, but well. I sadly can't go easy on you with this, but, hey, I won't kill you or anything. So go ahead. Try to chase me out of here. Dino went back to his usual languid, carefree expression, waving a hand as he replied. Plainly negotiations weren't working. The conversation was over, and the battle began. Take care of this for me, Beretta. Ramirez shouted, perhaps channeling another demon lord she knew. It was taken for granted that Ramirez herself wouldn't be fighting. Dino knew that, so instead of playing dumb, he turned toward Beretta, waiting to see what he'd break out. The control center was now a battlefield, and although it was a pretty big space, it was full of desks, chairs, and other obstacles. It wasn't too suited for battle at all, and Ramirez honestly wouldn't have minded settling this elsewhere. But Dino wasn't going to allow that. There was every chance Ramirez would try to get away as they changed locations. Thus, Alpha and the other Dryads briskly put away all the more important components of the room as the two combatants looked on. When they were done, battle began between Dino and Beretta, neither of whom really cared where they duked it out. Dino was now carrying a broadsword about his height, produced from parts unknown. Its name was Fangsmasher, a thick, single-bladed weapon that could cave in a foe's skull with sheer blunt force. It was a ponderous weapon, one that poorly matched with Dino's normal outfit of a robe and chest plate, but it somehow seemed to match him anyway. What's that sword capable of? In terms of EP, its value is 1 million. Alpha was at a loss for words in her report. What, a god-class blade? From Dino? That's so cheating. Ramirez's complaints made little sense. Dino let them pass, holding Fangsmasher up high ahead of him. Beretta, right in front of him, was unarmed, but his body was composed of the magisteel frame Rimuru had created for him. It was now well infused with Beretta's own magic force, transforming it into adamantite. It looked exactly as Rimuru had made it, but it was now far tougher and sturdier than before, and it even had Beretta's aura surrounding it, ensuring no run-of-the-mill weapon could touch him. He was a walking weapon at the legend class or higher, the toughest thing in the whole labyrinth. But even so, Dino casually brought his sword down in an arc. Beretta immediately crouched forward to dodge it. Being unnamed wasn't a disadvantage per se, but in this battle, it perhaps wasn't the best bet for him. His EP was a bit over 400,000, which would have made him even with Dino at one point, but if his opponent had a god-class weapon, he was hopelessly outclassed. So the empty-handed Beretta focused on dodging, avoiding Dino's frontal sword attacks. If he took the brunt of that blade, he would instantly be destroyed. And if worse came to worst, Sir Dino's existence points have ballooned from 400,000 to 2 million. The combined total is 3 million. It's overwhelming. Alpha sounded like all hope was lost. But Beretta wasn't shaken. Neither was Ramirez, who acted like this much was obvious. I don't know how you did it, but you're tricking the EP measuring device, huh? Guess there's still some work left to be done on it. Regardless, Alpha, you don't have to go calling Dino, sir, treating him like royalty or anything. What? Hey. I am a demon lord, aren't I? Oh, shut it. Beretta, no need to hold anything back. Give him a dose of your full powers and grant him the divine punishment he so desperately yearns for. I don't have the power to give divine justice, but if those are your orders, I will fulfill them as best I can. Long-suffering couldn't even begin to describe Beretta by this point. One's existence point count was just a yardstick, but facing down someone whose EP was 7 times yours wasn't exactly reassuring. He thought to himself how ridiculous this was as he sized up Dino, figuring out a way he could satisfy his master. You got it tough too, huh? I don't enjoy hearing that from my enemy, but I will not deny it, no. As he spoke, Beretta danced around Dino, evading any advance. His lack of defense wouldn't matter if Dino couldn't hit him. It all came to how you thought about it, and Beretta was a living weapon, head to toe. Fighting barehanded wasn't a hindrance, in fact, it opened a variety of attack approaches to him. Dino, meanwhile, was just lightly equipped, and only his large sword required any major attention. It'd pack a wallop if it hit him, but the same was true for anything Beretta unleashed. Thus, he had every opportunity to win, such were his thoughts as he awaited his chance. As a chaos golem, transforming the elements he attacked with was child's play to Beretta. He used the unique skill reverser to constantly switch them around as he searched for a weak point on Dino, calculating every move he made in order to secure an advantage. But Dino wasn't about to take this barrage sitting down. Right, you come from the dirty school of battle, don't you? I heard no one was a tougher fighter once you got on your opponent's nerves, and I gotta say, they're right. I appreciate the compliment. I wasn't complimenting you. Beretta was even using conversation as a weapon as he attempted to turn the tables on his disadvantage. He had no time to waste. He may not have been panicking, but as things stood, it took everything he had to just barely maintain this détente. Dino, meanwhile, had correctly surmised that he no longer held any great advantage. His attempted ambush had failed, and now he was paying for it with this pointless round of combat, completely wrecking his plans. Beretta and Dino were miles apart in terms of ability, but in terms of combat skill level, the difference wasn't all that wide. Despite that though, it was clear Beretta was near his limits. Here in Ramirez's labyrinth, he could be resurrected as often as needed, he didn't have to worry about running out of energy, and overloading himself power-wise wouldn't cause him any damage. He could constantly fight all out with no restrictions, and that was the sole reason he could hold his own against Dino. His environment was also protecting him, but that had its limits, he simply lacked the power needed to find a decisive edge. Impressive though, Dino thought. No wonder he's part of the Black Tribe. I didn't think he would hold out this much. Dino had to revise his opinion of Beretta. If Cherries and Trainee had stayed in this room, the battle would have ended with a lot less trouble. Not that either of them were pushovers, but angels held an overwhelming advantage against spirits by default. Besides, the two sides' battle experience were incomparable. As befitting his membership in the Black Tribe, Beretta had top-tier fighting skills, enough to take on Dino even. Beretta would die instantly if he took a hit, but he still had the courage to calmly handle Dino's strikes. Not only had Beretta not given up on winning, he even seemed to enjoy this, in a way. Whenever Dino deliberately let his guard down a bit, Beretta didn't react at all. That was praiseworthy, but the fact that Beretta landed a cut or two on him with his occasional counterattacks was a major surprise. As a fallen, he was weak against the holy element, but that wasn't a fatal flaw to him. And yet Beretta's attacks were dealing actual damage. He was mixing the dark and holy elements with each other, transforming his attacks to where Dino's defensive barrier couldn't block them fully. They were, Dino realized, impossible to defend. Much like spirit-based attacks, they would always deal damage unless one could repel them spiritually. Dino was a former seraphim. He knew how things worked with this world. That's why a mere unique skill causing damage to him was such a shock, and it was Beretta's stunning sense for battle that deserved the most praise of all. But now Dino was growing used to those moves. His sword swings were leaving him more open than necessary, but he would accept that. The way Beretta was attacking every weakness he showed was unexpected but still within what he could handle. While it may have looked like Beretta was pushing him around, none of Dino's strikes was even scratching him. The Fang Smasher could easily slice through even an adamantite body. One clean hit would turn the tide, so to Dino, this was no major concern whatsoever. Beretta, perhaps realizing this, was focused entirely on stretching this out as long as possible. He was beefing up his defenses, apparently concluding that the death by 1,000 cuts approach wouldn't work. He's choosing the right tactic though. After all, if Beretta keeps Ramirez protected, he wins. Dino was no fool. He could see how Beretta's mind was working. As long as Ramirez survived, nobody inside the labyrinth would ever die, but if she died, it was game over for everything. The labyrinth couldn't be guaranteed safe if she was kidnapped either, so it was obvious why Beretta was trying to bank as much time as possible. As things stood, Beretta was getting everything he wanted. But it wouldn't stay that way. Unfortunately for him, Dino still had one last trick up his sleeve. He was only putting up with Beretta's stalling because he needed to neutralize him right here, right now. Fighting a foe who could resurrect himself infinitely was such a pain that way. If Dino could capture Ramirez before Beretta revived himself, then all was well, but everyone else in the room was certain to dogpile on him then, and I've started aiming to kill everybody in the control center. Ramirez was likely to get caught in the crossfire. Dino said he didn't intend to kill her, and that was the truth, and also a pair of shackles holding him down. This is so annoying. I can't believe merely neutralizing Beretta is taking this much work. It'd be easy to just kill him, but, well, all the prep work's done, so it no longer matters. Beretta, you've done well. Take a nap. Fallen Hypno. So he unleashed his power. This was Fallen Hypno, a non-lethal, broad-range neutralizing attack derived from his unique skill Sloth. It lured any living creature into a sleep from which they would never awaken until the caster removed the curse. Attempting to mentally resist it was pointless. It was a deadly sin of a move, at the top levels of power, but as the word sloth would suggest, it took quite a long time to trigger, a painful weakness. Still, despite that time lag, one needed to have an ultimate skill on hand to even think about resisting it. It was a truly fearsome attack, one that fully deserved to be called the strongest of unique skill-driven moves. Dino wanted to neutralize Beretta and the others as quietly and peacefully as he could. He truly had no desire to harm anyone else in the control center, Shinji, his friends, the Dryads, even if they stepped up to protect Ramirez. Even Vesta, the first target he'd put to sleep, was someone he respected as a boss. Shinji's gang were acquaintances of his. There were even the buds of friendship sprouting. He really didn't want to do anything to betray them like this, but Feldway's orders were as absolute as they were incontrovertible. I can't believe how much work this is. Don't hate me for this, okay? I'll try asking Feldway to let you guys in here go, so. Dino muttered to no one in particular once he saw Beretta collapsing to the floor. Taking a glance at the sprawled out and snoring Ramirez, Dino extended a hand, assuming his mission was complete. Not so fast. But he was stopped by an icy voice. Are you kidding me? Dino turned around to find her standing there. Her cilia were shining in yellow and silver, the exoskeleton protecting more vulnerable sections of her body made of glossy black adamantite. Her wings, gleaming blue like an exotic butterfly's, comprised 2 pairs. They were the same color as the compound eyes on her forehead, giving her an otherworldly charm. This was a pedo, freshly awoken from her evolutionary slumber, and while her colors had changed appreciably compared to before, she still looked largely the same. If anything though, her beyond-human beauty was even further polished. There was an air of authority to her aura, like she had reached even greater heights as Insect Queen. A pedo? Perfect. Can you destroy my chaos core for me? Since demons had zero need for sleep, Beretta was just barely able to resist fallen hypno. He was conscious enough only to ask a pedo for the favor before descending into sleep mode. Sir Beretta. You're still conscious? But you can't move. Dino's shock caused him to react a beat late, and that made him miss Apito's next move. Without asking why he made that request, Apito shot out a poison stinger and broke Beretta's chaos core to pieces. The Osiris rapier, a self-regenerating weapon she was justly proud of, easily penetrated through the thick adamantite. She could produce this rapier within her own body, creating as many of them as she pleased. Without this evolution though, there was no way she could have done the job. Beretta laughed. Ha, ha ha ha. Impressive. Now I will die, only to be reborn in perfect condition. I must ask you to hold down the fort for a little while, Apito. He had stepped down as leader of the 10 dungeon marvels, but he remained Ramirez's personal aide, and thus he had the authority to give orders to the other marvels. Very well. Sadly, I fear I cannot defeat this adversary alone, so I hope you will return shortly. Despite her words, Apito's voice lent credence to the idea that she was sure she'd win. Dino, apparently sensing this, scowled. Come on. What a decision. You didn't even give me a moment to intervene. He was right. Leaving him to Apito, Beretta disappeared into a swarm of light particles. Then Apito sprang forth at light speed, and the battle inside the control center grew even more intense. This really sucks. That was Dino's unadorned impression of the situation. Apito was no sweat as an opponent, but in the labyrinth, he just couldn't kill her. He wanted to finish her and secure Ramirez ASAP, but Apito was leveraging her speed to constantly get in his way. She didn't try to seriously engage Dino at all, preferring a stick-and-move approach. In her evolved form, she had perhaps grown more specialized for speed-based tactics, and she fully understood what made her unique. There was no waste to her moves at all. Her EP was probably around 700,000, but in speed, at least, she was easily Dino's equal. Even worse, once Dino finally thought he killed her, Beretta would be revived by then. It hadn't even been a minute yet, and already he had teleported himself back in. Apito was doing a perfectly fine job buying time for Beretta, because even against someone as overwhelming as Dino, she didn't need to stall 10 seconds. At this point, Dino had nothing left to work with. His best bet was to put Beretta and Apito to sleep simultaneously. Calming himself, he tried breaking out the unique skill Sloth once more. Whether against one target or many, Sloth took its time before it deployed. Dino stopped panicking and gauged the current situation, remarkably calm for someone in the middle of combat. The first thing he noticed was the image on the control center's screen, depicting Rimuru fighting Velgrind after she defeated her brother in the kaiju battle. Dude, how the hell did he escape? And, he's an even match for Velgrind? This was the biggest surprise of the day. The way Feldway put it, the demon Lord Rimuru and his generals were all locked away in an alternate dimension of Velgrind's creation. The escape was actually pretty simple. Rimuru used the Soul Corridor with his friends to determine his physical location, and that was all it took. But Dino, not aware of that, was absolutely dumbfounded. The even greater surprise, however, was Rimuru's strength. Velgrind seemed all but invincible, and Rimuru even seemed to push her around a bit. Concern crossed Dino's mind. We're gonna be in big trouble unless I make some progress soon, maybe. His attention tuned toward the others. Capturing Ramirez first was the main keystone of Feldway's plan. Dino was stationed in the labyrinth because Guy had ordered him in there. That was a total coincidence, and unfortunately for Dino, it attracted Feldway's attention. Dino couldn't be more reluctant about it, but he was the only ally who had free access to the highly secured control center. It was simply the hand he was dealt, and he accepted it. Feldway had put together a grandiose plan to secure an invasion pathway for him and his minions. He had goaded Velgrind into destroying the labyrinth so Veldora would come out from hiding. That worked brilliantly, much to Dino's surprise, and now Feldway himself was taking the lead to carry out this invasion. Feldway was accompanied by 2 of the 3 mystic leaders, along with 5 generals Zorario took along with him. They were 8 people in all, and deploying not 1 but 2 of his highest officers for the job was nothing short of lavish. Only Abala, the last remaining mystic leader, was left, and she was presumably handling guard duties over at the Mystic Palace deep in the other world. Hearing this plan, Dino could only conclude that Feldway wanted this thing to succeed at all costs. But Dino wasn't the only primordial angel on this planet who had been contacted about the project. 2 others, living undercover in human civilization, had also been called up. They technically worked under Dino, but Feldway didn't bother going through him for this. Their job was to keep the destroyed labyrinth going, a safety valve just in case Dino somehow failed in his mission. It took only a passing thought from Ramirez to turn this labyrinth into a prison, and then getting out of here would be a huge undertaking that Feldway wanted to avoid. These were the 2 people Dino was most concerned about at the moment. He scanned the screen for them. Oh, 4. Come on. They're in an even bout with Pico and Garasha. Pico was a tiny young woman, Garasha a much more imposing warrior type. With Velgrind victorious over Veldora, the city that had been isolated in the labyrinth was now back on the surface. Geld had stepped up to defend it, but he never expected Geld would be asked to fight the likes of Pico and Garasha. Geld the Barrier Lord, and Kamara the Chimera Lord? Wait, Kamara's a cryptid, isn't she? She's not descended from Ivillage, the World Destroyer dragon, is she? Nah, no way. Dino quickly banished the ghastly idea his imagination gave him. They call them the 12 Lordly Guardians for a reason, I guess, he thought to himself. Ash checked on the other battlefields. There he saw Zorario, another one of the 3 mystic leaders. Wow, Zorario's kicking ass like usual, huh? He doesn't even seem to take this seriously, either. Way to make it look easy against Cheris and Trainee. His old partner, Zorario, was as strong as ever. It always struck Dino that he had this creepy underside he never revealed in public, but clearly he'd been improving himself over the past few millennia. Concluding he was in no trouble at all, Dino moved on. And here's Cornu. I heard he screwed up the invasion a few decades ago big time. Maybe that's why he looks so distressed. As Dino keenly observed, Cornu seemed to be panicking, and it was clear why. That previous mistake had cost him his entire army and injured him so badly that he needed several decades to fully recover. If he blew it again this time, Feldway was likely going to do away with him entirely. Even worse, if all was going to plan, Feldway was traveling alongside Cornu incognito as well. The pressure must be so intense, Dino reasoned, that it kept him from exercising his full powers. He's got bad luck is all. But Masayuki's a wimp in real life, and I don't think anyone else opposing him is a challenge either. Venom's membership in the Black Tribe is a concern, but I guess he came on the scene way later than Beretta. He'll probably be okay. Dino wasn't too concerned, in part because he wasn't that friendly with Cornu to start with. If he messed this up, Feldway would probably step up to wipe his ass. Things were still going to plan. It was perhaps this sense of relief that caused Dino's lazy mind to play tricks on him. It's odd though. Why am I here worrying about if this operation will work? Like, what's gotten into me? A pretty important question. Something bothered Dino about this whole plan, something he couldn't get out of his mind. He couldn't put it into words, exactly, which irritated him, but he figured he'd put his finger on it before long. Unfortunately. Why are you playing around, Dino? I am going on the move shortly. Carry out your mission at once. The calmer part of Dino's day had come to a close. Pfft. I really hate working. Dino had no argument with Beretta or Apito. In fact, he liked them. That's why he resented these orders so much, but there was no defying them. Well, he said to himself as he decided to get serious about this. Feldway, fresh from reminding Dino about his orders, was in hiding as he watched Cornu fight. Cornu tended to be overconfident in his abilities, but he was still a reliable ally. He had received his name from Veldanava, just like Feldway had, and Feldway considered Cornu a valuable asset. But Cornu had put in a terrible showing last time, losing a third of the entire army despite possessing overwhelming power against the piddling planet they invaded. That was more than enough reason for Feldway to forsake him, and Cornu knew that full well. Clearly he was fighting for keeps right now, not toying with his foe like he usually did. It wasn't a sight Feldway welcomed. The three mystic leaders were expected to be all-powerful dominators in battle, not people to be toyed with by far weaker enemies. These were enemies Cornu should finish off in one blow, and instead he was letting them run all over him. He had completely fallen for the enemy's trap, not even realizing that Masayuki had been replaced with an imposter. It was beyond exasperating at this point, it almost made Feldway want to kill him, in fact. But he somehow contained himself. Then, ignoring Cornu entirely, he stepped up to take out Masayuki. Meanwhile, Masayuki left the scene with languid steps. The idea of fleeing the battle alone didn't sit well with him. He was, of course, quite scared, but the idea of abandoning his friends was even scarier. If something happened to him, he'd spend the rest of his life beating himself up over it. Masayuki stopped for a moment and turned around. From far away, he could see his friends fighting for their lives. Minutes was keeping the enemy contained, the vampires were capitalizing on their immortality to divert their attention, and Caligulio and Venom were attacking whenever they found a hole to exploit. Jiwoo, in particular, was putting on a masterful show, setting herself up in just the right place to prevent Cornu from uncorking any super-destructive attacks. For such a hastily assembled crew, they were showing real teamwork, but if they lost even one person, the whole thing was likely to crumble. Hey, Masayuki. Bernie, I gotta head back. Like, I never really talked about this because I didn't want to blow my cover, but, really, I wish I could have gotten friendlier with all you guys. I know I'm a coward, but I don't want to be a backstabber too, you know? Then, with that admission of the truth, the world language spoke up in Masayuki's brain. The heroic trait of courageously refusing to run has been detected. Now that all three conditions have been met, a hidden power of the unique skill Chosen One has been unlocked. Invoke? Yes. No. Huh. Thought Masayuki. He was afraid he had gone and screwed up yet again, sighing in relief when he realized he hadn't. He didn't really care about any more hidden powers within him, but there wasn't much point in turning back on this whole thing now. So Masayuki agreed to it. Confirmed. New power added to Chosen One. Successful. Heroic recourse is now permanently activated. Along, complicated description flashed across his mind. It gave him an ache of nostalgia as he marveled at it, gradually grasping his new ability. He was already in possession of heroic aura, which awed his targets into submission, heroic compensation, which offered near impossible levels of luck, heroic charm, which granted courage to his companions, and heroic action, which was still kind of a mystery but seemed to massage events so they always worked out to his benefit in the end. Heroic recourse, the recent addition, apparently made him into a kind of magnet for heroes. Guide the souls of the dead? I became a vessel? What's up with that? I don't really need that skill if it requires all my friends to die. Masayuki saw it coming. Yet another totally useless skill in his quiver. He hadn't expected much in the first place, so it was no genuine disappointment. As long as it didn't actively make things worse, that was enough. Masayuki, you. So come on, Bernie, how about we go back? Returning to the subject at hand, this new ability of his was already lost to the ether. All right. If that's what you want, I'll join you. Bernie scratched his head in defeat. Then, sharing a grin with each other, they turned around, and things kicked into high gear. Feldway was on the move. Bernie meant nothing to him, but he was blocking him from taking Masayuki away. His fighting stance was full of holes. Feldway could off him with one swing. Or, really, Bernie's actual ability didn't matter. He was just garbage in Feldway's mind. Without so much as a breeze, without even revealing his presence, Feldway attempted to decapitate Bernie with his drawn sword. But all that resulted in was a sharp, echoing sound, blade clanging against blade. You're stopping me? Who are you? What are you doing? For an instant, it surprised Feldway. He was answered by a young girl in a mask. I am Cronoa, and what I'm doing is being a hero. A moment of silence. Then Feldway's burst of laughter. Look at this. A hero gracing us with her presence. Let me give you my name, then. I am Feldway, the Mystic Lord. The name didn't faze Cronoa. Her mind was now in perfect sync with Chloe's, and she was a cold steel machine of warfare. Mystic Lord? So you're the boss of these Magic-born? I came out because I couldn't let this injustice go on in front of me, but if you're a threat to humanity as well, I'll just eliminate you here. Hehehe. Pretty brave talk. Let me put you in your place, fool. The moment he stopped speaking, Feldway, dressed in his scarlet-red uniform, took action. Cronoa, in her white-themed Holy Spirit armor, also disappeared. Flashes of red and white light streaked before the eyes of Masayuki and his friends. They had all but gone invisible to them, but the sounds were deafening. There were no shock waves, however, not even a slight breeze. The battle was taking place on a dimension beyond anyone's comprehension. This masked girl had come to Masayuki's aid once before, and now she was doing it again. He understood that, but as he was now, he doubted there was much he could do to help this girl. What should we do? This is on a level far beyond anything we can intervene in. No point dwelling on it. We just gotta do what we can. Come on, let's go help everyone out. The sounds reaching his ears told Bernie that he was being targeted. The fact that he couldn't even react to it at all told him just what sort of realm this fight was unfolding within. It wasn't because some spell had weakened him, he was simply isolated, incapable of putting up a fight, no matter what he did. If so, he couldn't just run around like an idiot here. He had to take action, a thought drilled into him by his military experience. All right. I don't know who that Cronoa person is, but let's leave this to her. Masayuki, meanwhile, was used to having exceptional events take place around him. Clearly, getting out of Dodge was his best bet. So, regardless of what Bernie and Masayuki were doing, Cronoa and Feldway were crossing swords. But the fight didn't last long. Countless strikes and parries occurred in the space of a few seconds. The witnesses wondered if there would ever be any resolution to this at all, but then Feldway noticed. Ha 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 ha. So that's where it was. It seems Lady Veldanava's will is for me to win after all. What are you talking about? Ha. None of your business. Then again, I could tell you, since you'll be joining me shortly. Bow to my will, Serial, Lord of Hope. It was an absolute order, and even an angelic ultimate skill couldn't resist Michael's ultimate dominion. What did you do? Oh. You're still conscious? You live up to your reputation as the world's strongest hero, Cronoa. But resistance is useless. It's only a matter of time before you fall under my rule. Feldway rejoiced at his sheer luck. Cronoa the hero's exploits were legend across the world, even in the Empire. Having Serial work its way into her was truly a gift from the gods. Cronoa fell to her knees, just as Feldway had willed her. I am Serial. Your orders, Sir Michael. Her mask came off, revealing her face and the beauty it held, and those were the words that came from her sweet, pinkish lips. Now Feldway was sure of his victory. And that assured confidence led him to make a serious mistake. Here he had control over Cornu, mystic leader and his close confidant, and Cronoa, a powerful hero easily his equal, despite not being the real version of her. With the two of them, he reasoned, completing his mission would be simple. So. Very good. I want you to work with Cornu to kill the young man from before. I have other business awaiting me on the surface, so please take care of this for me. With that, he left the labyrinth. Seeing Masayuki and Bernie come running back, Venom wanted to curse the heavens themselves. Not that he minded them here. He could sense the rising, menacing presence lurking in the direction they had fled to, so he thought they had fallen dead by now. Way to survive, guys. What a relief. Ha ha ha. Little early to be saying that. The enemy's still around. Yeah. Venom had to admit it, Cornu was strong. They had an immense advantage fighting in the labyrinth, but it wasn't a matter of whether they could win. They weren't even sure they'd survive. But despite all that, one look at Masayuki's face, and Venom felt tremendously relieved. Baseless confidence filled his veins, and he couldn't help but think it'd all work out somehow. Minutes and Caligulio, apparently feeling the same way, looked much healthier than before. Hehehe. Maybe it's not appropriate, but I'm really having fun here. Right you are again. I feel so light on my feet, as if His Majesty himself has joined me on the field. The two Imperial officers shared a laugh. Even the vampires, who had no reason to be that involved in this, seemed eager to continue the fight. Cornu, meanwhile, was confused. Just when he was about to attack, a second Masayuki appeared out of nowhere. He looked closer, wondering if he'd misjudged his foe's position, but it was definitely Masayuki. One of them had to be a fake, which was exactly what the disguised Jiwoo was. How dare you trifle with me? All you worthless insects and your stupid tricks. As enraged as Cornu was, he had no way of telling which Masayuki was real. His senses told him both were about equal in strength, each of them was a little hard for him to grasp. That's what made this so maddening. If Cornu got riled up enough, he might easily kill them both at once, but then they'd get revived in parts unknown and he'd have to find them. Thus, Cornu faced an even more nerve-wracking battle than before. But then a helping hand arrived. Is that you, Sir Cornu? My name is Serial, in the service of Sir Michael. An unfamiliar girl flew in faster than anyone's eyes could follow, offering her help. Cornu had no reason to doubt her words. This girl, Serial, was infused with the aura of Michael, just as she'd hinted. Thank you. You aim for the Masayuki on the right. Don't kill him. He must be captured alive. Whether it was a stroke of luck or not, Cornu had just pointed out the real Masayuki. Yes, sir. Serial nodded, her eyes turning toward her target. Masayuki, sensing this, began sweating a little. Then their eyes met. Serial? That girl called herself Kronoa, and I'm not really sure what her deal is, but she turned traitor on us that fast? Like. Masayuki was lost for a moment. Then he gave up all hope. But Kronoa's beauty was so flooring that he hardly felt any fear. In fact, he was too preoccupied to feel anything. What's with that girl? She's so cute. It wasn't very appropriate, but the shock made him forget all about being on a battlefield. There was only one way to describe her, a beauty for the ages, the same conclusion a certain blonde-haired demon lord had also made. It made Masayuki wish she would keep the mask off for good, among other stupid complaints that ran through his mind. But as stupid as these thoughts were, they offered him a glimmer of hope. Serial's hand reached for her sword. Masayuki mentally prepared to die. His life flashed before his eyes in a sort of sloppy, haphazard manner. Man, I can't get over how hot this lady is. Seriously, she's gotta be the hottest woman I've seen so far in my... Then a frigid chill came over him. His self-preservation instincts were shouting at him to stop with this train of thought. He decided to trust them. Second hottest, actually. Yeah, probably second hottest. Because number one has to be. The face in his mind belonged to a blue-haired beauty, the last one he'd seen in his original world. Right, yeah, that one. She looked really sweet and everything, and way sexy too. Not even the threat of imminent death deterred Masayuki from his delusions. But that was actually the right answer. Heroic true love detected. Now that the fourth hidden condition has been met, the unique skill chosen one will evolve to the ultimate skill lord of heroes. Huh. Masayuki was lost. This wasn't love he was feeling. It was more like primal lust than anything. Why was this voice in his mind trying to pass it off as virtuous or whatever? It was so embarrassing. He wished he could complain about it to someone. And besides, why do I get an ultimate skill even though I didn't even do anything? He screamed to himself internally, accusing the world language of stretching way too far out to justify all that. But nothing could change these results. Besides, getting an ultimate skill whose purpose he knew nothing about didn't exactly seem like a winning edge against Serial in front of him. I'm glad I got this and all, although it's coming a little late, you know? But hey, I've made it this far. If I'm done for, I want to go out with a bang. So Masayuki let a bold smile spread across his face. The effect was dramatic. Protect His Majesty. The Imperial soldiers on the scene, who had kept their distance up to now because they'd just get in the way, began an all-out suicide assault, like their lives no longer meant anything to them. Even those on the far outer edges of the field were doing this, and the results were even more awe-inspiring on soldiers closer by. I can feel it teeming within me. This must be what it feels like to be completely sure of your victory. With a shout, Caligulio thrust at Cornu. His hands had been full just defending himself before, but this self-sacrificial attack made Cornu flinch for just an instant. Minutes was no slouch, either. Listen, Imperial soldiers. Let His Majesty bask in your courageous force. Driving his army on, he kept his eyes on Serial, applying a pressor to keep the pressure on her. A unique skill would normally never work against an ultimate skill, but this time, the attack was just enough to force Serial back a little. Even the vampires were springing into action. Strange, huh? I feel so omnipotent right now, and it feels nice. So shouted one of them, a smile on his face, as he leaped at Cornu and had the lower half of his body blown off. Hiya. Taste the heat of my full-power energy beam. Not a single care was given as they pressed forward, died, revived, and repeated the process again. Hiya ha 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 ha. I love this. Some of them were even using their perpetual resurrection skills to serve as human, vampire, shields for the other soldiers. Intense wasn't the half of it. This was a vast, vicious attack like nothing before. What made it possible? Masayuki's new ability, of course. Unlike his unique level skills, Lord of Heroes, while firmly in the lowest rank of the ultimate family, granted him the chance to compete against anyone else's ultimate skill. It took someone with an EP of at least 100,000 to even withstand the effects of casting it, but even if Masayuki lacked that, his luck was giving him enough of a bonus to make up for it, and anyone who followed in his footsteps was given similar protection. Truly, it wrecked the whole balance of the fight. Just him alone on the field could reverse the tide of battle. It was an unbelievable ability. And if Masayuki hadn't had the chance to see Chloe Aubert's unmasked face just now, he never would have awakened to it. Now, perhaps, it should be clear just how terrible a mistake Feldway had made. Either way, the battle was now firmly at a stalemate. This very delicate balance held reign over the scene for a bit more than 10 minutes. Naturally, that wasn't going to be enough to defeat the tag team of Cornu and Serial, but realistically speaking, the battle was already decided. The moment Masayuki unlocked his ultimate skill, all the paths came together. Now, with the warriors finally buying enough time for themselves, the moment had come. Velgrind had just been erased from this world, and at the same time, the gears of fate began to turn. Confirmed. Transdimensional soul corridor with the subject Velgrind established. Huh. Before Masayuki could think of anything else, she appeared. At first, it felt to him like a wall of pure energy. But it wasn't. It took the form of a person, a beautiful woman, one from his own past. The cardinal aura she emitted, framed by her almost blindingly beautiful blue hair, belonged to Velgrind the Flame Dragon, manifested right here on the battlefield. Her eyes contained the force to make all of creation bow to her. No one dared move, it was like time had stopped. Serial was the same, silently waiting for Cornu's orders. Little more could be expected, given how this new presence had only just been born within her body. All the Imperial soldiers on the scene immediately recognized what this was. This was the most powerful figure in existence, the one who kept the Empire safe over so many years. Word had spread that she was locked in combat with Veldora right now, but apparently that was a false rumor, because here she was, in an embrace with Masayuki. There was just one explanation for this tender move. She was in love with him. I was looking for you, Ledora. I've wanted to see you for so long. She turned her closed eyes toward Masayuki as she held him close. Then she brought both hands to his head and gave him a warm kiss. It wasn't how Masayuki had thought this would work out. Ah. Whoa, soft. Or sweet? Or, wait, His head began to boil. In a flash, all reasoning ability was erased. A terrifyingly beautiful woman was hugging him, which was fine and all. But and my first kiss. The casual outfit, just a simple t-shirt and jeans, combined with Velgrind's natural beauty created a supremely hip look. And she was kissing him. He'd be lying if he claimed not to like it. But he couldn't forget one important issue here. This stunning woman had just called him Ledora. Oh God, she totally thinks I'm someone else. Now wasn't the point where he could stand there and tell her, sorry, I think you got the wrong guy. For one thing, she'd need to take her lips off his face before he could say anything. Masayuki needed to get a breath of air soon. See, calm down. You need to stay calm in moments like these. He reassessed the situation. This was a battlefield. His enemy was right in front of him. He was making out with this world-beating beauty. And thanks to being this close range to her, he couldn't help but notice her ample chest against his. It was sublime, almost heavenly bliss, but he couldn't let himself enjoy it. What am I even doing? He thought as his mind grew more muddled. One thing he knew for sure was that once she realized she had the wrong guy, his life was over right then. With all the many, many people witnessing this, it'd be impossible to talk his way out of it. Even with Masayuki's preposterous luck, he couldn't expect this to turn out in his favor at all. He was experiencing the sheer bliss of enlightenment, but he knew that his promised doom was just around the corner. So he stopped thinking. He was about to die anyway, and he just wanted to appreciate the fact that he got to experience this kiss at the very end. So he defiantly enjoyed his final few seconds of life. His consciousness grew hazy, like he was having a dream, and then the misunderstandings began to spread. Ah, His Majesty's a shrewd man indeed. Not to be vulgar, but yes, I agree. Looking at the two of them, I can feel a certain love that none could interfere with, and bonds that none could break. Hee hee. Lady Velgrind looks like a young girl in love, doesn't she? Hee hee hee. So the Empire's guardian dragon was smitten with His Majesty, was she? Indeed. Truly, good tidings await the Empire in its future. Not one member of the audience harbored negative thoughts about Masayuki. In fact, none of them suspected he wasn't Ladora himself. He wanted to shout to them all about how wrong they were, but his lips were still occupied at the moment. But I've never even had a girlfriend, much less been married. He had to laugh at the absurdity of the world. But then salvation came, in the form of Cornu, his enemy. Velgrind. Enough of this nonsense. Why? You're supposed to be under the thrall of Sir Michael. Why are you getting in my way? In Cornu's mind, Velgrind was a useful pawn, one fully captured and belonging to his side. Her interference right now was making him explode into an irritated rage. My, how boorish of you. You'd have to be an idiotic man to get in our way. Velgrind, finally removing herself from Masayuki, gave Cornu a dissatisfied frown. Her gaze was bracing, but it didn't stop him. Silence. Stop playing around and help me out. Take that man you're embracing and choke the life out of him. It was the most taboo thing he could have said. And Cornu did not know how much wrath it inspired in Velgrind. You're saying you want me to kill him? All sound vanished from the battlefield. Only Cornu continued to shout, failing to realize what was going on. Am I hearing an echo, Velgrind? I don't care how strong you are, I'm your commander here. All you have to do is follow my orders. And Cornu never realized what was happening, right up to the very end. He just didn't have the mental capacity to realize Velgrind wasn't who she used to be. No, you die. It was a merciless strike. The reborn Velgrind was incomparably stronger than before, her magic now refined to a hilt. It precisely, accurately turned Cornu into a pile of ashes. Without a chance to counterattack or even get another word in, he was no more. And even more astounding, the attack worked its way across dimensions, a trick brought about by Dimensional Combo, part of her newly found ability Transdimensional Leap. Cornu's real body, in the other world he now called home, disappeared before it could even detect any danger. I let it slide last time too. Such a fool. I had almost forgotten the grudge I had against Feldway. I should never have let myself do that. She spat out the words, then turned toward Serial. Oh, her name is really Kronoa, Masayuki chimed in. She saved my life a second ago. It's okay. I won't do anything, I don't need to. Michael's influence made the ultimate skill Serial take root within her psyche, but she's resisting it all by herself. That's why she's motionless like that. But if you're still worried, you can have Rimuru look at her afterward. I'm sure he'll have just the right remedy for it. Not that it'll be necessary, I don't think. Velgrind turned away from Serial, the occupier of Kronoa's mind. Realizing she wasn't wary of Kronoa at all, Masayuki finally relaxed. So the battle came to a close. Many of its combatants were just as relieved as Masayuki, while others were so anxious that they could barely walk straight. Now everyone here knew what Valgrind really was. It was Bernie, standing next to Masayuki, who drummed up the courage to act first. He was the closest to Valgrind, and now he flew out and kneeled before her, almost on all fours. Marshal, I am Bernie, member of the single digits and rank number 7. I only hope that you are glad to see me, my... Enough. Thank you. What do you want to say to me? Yes, my lord. I disobeyed the orders of my captain and refused to end the life of Masayuki, the young man here. I understand this is punishable by death, but before the execution begins, I beg you to listen to what I have to say. The scene fell quiet again. It was another bombshell for the crowds of soldiers watching. The marshal, the chief commander of the imperial military, was Valgrind herself. This threw a lot of the crowd for a loop, but far more of them were quickly convinced it was true. Now, as they grasped the concept, reality set in with them. They were all on the losing side of the war, and that meant Valgrind would see them as worthy of execution, a fate it was pointless to struggle against. Faced with the power of a dragon who could destroy this entire labyrinth, all they could do was wait for their fates to unfold. They instinctively formed lines, nervously awaiting their judgment, as the conversation continued. Right. What is it? All of us before you remain just as loyal to the Empire as we always have. No matter what the Emperor decides, we are ready, willing, and able to carry it out to the letter. It is with that in mind that I beseech you, my marshal, to allow this army to return home. You are free to pin the blame for this on myself and the officers. None of us would breathe a word of dissent against that. But... All right, all right. Bernie was crestfallen, his most earnest begging cut off midway. There was no avoiding fate. Tears flowed as he realized just how powerless he was. Valgrind rewarded that with a little snicker. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I give you the wrong idea? Maybe you're all not the brightest lights out there, but you did work hard for us. I appreciate that. Thank you for protecting my beloved Ladora. All the soldiers immediately took a knee, lowering their heads. So then. I wasn't thinking about doing anything to any of you. Only Ladora truly matters to me, but I know Ladora thinks the world of you all, so I'll grant you my protection. I always have, and I always will. It was like a gospel from heaven. Cheers erupted across the crowd, some broke down in sobs, Caligulio and Minutes among them. They believed in, and were moved by, everything Valgrind told them. Glory to the Empire. Glory to His Majesty the Emperor. The excitement was palpable, the noise deafening. Masayuki wondered what had gotten into these people. By the looks of things, this throng thinks that I'm Emperor Ladora. Like, come on, Bernie, tell them. If the truth comes out, it's me who's gonna pay for it, you know. She even kissed me. I'm so gonna be killed, aren't I? His name wasn't even Ladora, but nobody on hand doubted that it wasn't. He wondered if his sanity was beginning to slip on him. That kiss was a sheer joy, but honestly speaking, Masayuki didn't want to get caught up in any of this. What's wrong? You don't look too happy. If there's something on your mind, by all means, tell me. The desolate Masayuki was a bit shaken when Valgrind directly addressed him. Oh. No, there's nothing on my mind. He had trouble assembling the words. The awkward display clouded Valgrind's face. Could it be, she gingerly asked, that you don't remember me? This felt like a test to Masayuki. But what was the right answer? Get it wrong, and he was in huge trouble. Gimme a break, he said to himself as his mind raced. If this was a yes/no question, then yes, he remembered her. She was definitely the beautiful woman who became the last thing he ever saw in his original world. But did he know her name? That guy called her Valgrind. Isn't that the name of Valdora's sister? Crazy strong and everything? And the guardian of the Empire and stuff too. This internal struggle was paying off. More and more facts came into his head, and based on how the Imperial soldiers had reacted, his supposition was likely correct. So he placed his bet. "You're Velgrind, aren't you?" Velgrind's face erupted into a broad smile. "Yes. Yes. You do remember, Ladora." Even now, Masayuki's luck didn't abandon him. Simply being called by her name elated Velgrind. And that wasn't all. "Ah, now I realize why you had that concerned look. I was so overjoyed to see you that I forgot, but your name right now is Masayuki, isn't it?" Things got better and better for him. Any concern that Velgrind had the wrong guy was now firmly in the past. "Wait, what? This girl knows that I'm Masayuki Hanjo?" Sheer relief. The kind of relief he hadn't felt since the day he was born. He was so relaxed, he almost lost control of his bladder right there. Then he tensed up again before things went hairy on him. That's right. I'm not Ladora right now, I'm Masayuki. And, I think I'm a little confused about all of this and stuff, ha ha ha. As he chuckled, he kept a careful eye on Velgrind's reaction. But she wasn't the only problem. Based on how this has transpired, I'm totally sure the crowd here thinks I'm Ladora. If I say I'm someone else up here, it's just gonna confuse them, won't it? I can't have people accuse me of posing as the Emperor. I gotta tell them I'm not the guy. He wasn't sure if it was something he'd go to jail for, but either way, Masayuki wanted to set the record straight. So he decided to come clean, but Velgrind wasn't having it. "Oh, it's not a problem. The Empire's worthless. It's simply a possession of Ladora's, kind of a hobby of his. He just kept it safe because he needed it for his competition against Gi. If you don't think you want it, I could raise every square inch of it for you." Truly, it was the words of a god, an existence beyond human perception. The Imperial soldiers turned pale. All eyes were on Masayuki. "No. Stop. Don't. Quit acting like it's my fault." Feeling the heavy burden of this responsibility, and the eyes burning holes in his skull, he spoke up. "No, I do cherish the Empire. Like, even Rimuru wants to be friends with it in the future and stuff. Once this war is over, we could sign a treaty and be friendly and so on, right?" At the very least, he pleaded, he didn't want the Eastern Empire to experience a border-to-border nuclear winter. The soldiers looked up to him like he was a god. If Velgrind said she could do it, she would, and probably with a casual flick of the wrist too. If Masayuki didn't protest, the Empire was doomed for sure. Everyone knew that, and now everyone deeply appreciated Masayuki. "Oh, well, if that's how you feel, I'll keep helping with it, then," Velgrind replied with a smile. The soldiers heaved a collective sigh of relief. Caligulio spoke for the crowd. "There is, if you don't mind, just one matter I would like clarified for us." His face was pained. Clearly, he didn't want to say what came next. "What's that?" Velgrind asked, her voice indicating that she wanted this over with already. "My lord, I wanted to inquire about Sir Ladora, our current emperor. What will, happen to him?" A spark of recognition crossed her face. "Ah, right. I guess none of you can visually see the essence of a person's soul. Ladora, right now, is nothing but a shell. The soul of the true Ladora has gathered here, inside my beloved Masayuki." Me? "Yes, you. You may not recall it, but you absolutely were Ladora. That's why I love you. I love you, and I'll do my best to make you love me as well." Okay? Would a beautiful woman saying this fail to rouse the spirits of any man? Of course not. And Masayuki was no exception. But just because she was crazy for him now didn't mean that it'd last forever. He swore to himself that he'd work harder than ever, if only to ensure his luck held out. Exactly what he'd have to do, he'd work out later. It was with this newfound resolve that Masayuki quickly had to face another problem. Well, if Sir Masayuki is our true emperor, it's up to us to offer our support to his claim, isn't it? Huh. Indeed. But it'll be tricky. In terms of bloodlines, he's a completely different person. Claiming he's an illegitimate child will be unlikely to work. I'm not sure it's something we can fully sweep under the rug. Hold on. Does it matter though? You can handle the issue with the military, Sir Caligulio, and I can smooth things over with the nobility. I'm certainly not about to accept any dissent on this issue after all. We can't afford to waste time on this either. If we fail, the whole empire will collapse. Caligulio immediately threw in his support. Bernie brought up a potential issue, and Minutes offered a solution. All three leaders were ready to devote their full powers to this, and so Masayuki, through no fault of his own, saw himself inching closer and closer to the throne. Well, Masayuki, you've got a big job now, I'd say. Do I have the right to refuse? Probably not. He gave up. It was, after all, the opening to yet another new phase of his hapless life. Dino was finally ready to get serious. Having this much trouble against such an eminently beatable opponent annoyed him greatly, but that was coming to a rapid end. Think you have the time to look away? Beretta's sharp fist brushed past his cheek. Acting so distracted around us. I truly am offended, you know. Apito's Osiris rapiers rained down. Dino doggedly avoided them. One hit was sure to hurt. I kind of assumed that I way outclassed these guys, but maybe that was just my ego talking. It's 2-on-1, but still, I didn't expect to struggle this badly. Dino was losing confidence. Maybe all that lazing around had weakened him. The silly thought showed that his heart still wasn't really in this, perhaps, but he didn't care. All her training with Hinata gave Apito incredible intuition, something dangerously close to clairvoyance. Dino was clearly the superior fighter, but even he couldn't let his guard down around her. Beretta was now serving as a tank, with Apito attacking from the rear, although Beretta put up some offense as well. Their twin barrage had what it took to reach Dino. Even worse was Beretta's magic. Very little magic worked on Dino, but Beretta's mainly involved support spells that boosted his own specs. Dino could shoot down magic attacks that weakened him, but if the spells boosted Beretta's and Apito's speed, strength, or endurance, he had no way to intervene. He could try interrupting the spellcasting process, but Beretta was a magically gifted demon who could fire off spells before Dino could react. Even worse, the sleep function of Sloth wasn't working on Beretta. That's why he was having so much trouble in this fight. But at long last, everything within him was fully built up. It was time to strike back. Shut up. Quit acting so superior even though it takes two of you to bully me like this. I'm only putting up with you because I'm so patient, okay? You ought to be thankful. Here, eat this and take a nap for me. By the time he finished speaking, Fallen Hypno was already underway. As underhanded as Dino was, this was about as unsportsmanlike as you could get. Phew. Finally over. Watching Apito collapse, Dino was assured of his victory. Just in case though, he shot a look at Beretta, and hurriedly dodged his advancing fist. Whoa. Did you resist my sleep? Of course. Falling for it once was enough of a blunder. I could hardly let myself fall asleep again. Beretta could come up with countermeasures because he was a demon, a creature with built-in resistance to status effects. With his unique skill reverser, he could rework sleepiness to its natural opposite. No way. Now, I know it doesn't make Apito look very good, but let's have her die and get revived for us. Beretta stood boldly in front of Dino. Seeing him find a guaranteed way to victory and stick to it so doggedly almost impressed the demon lord more than it exasperated him. I can't believe he's kept it so even against someone like me. It's not that I'm underperforming, it's that Beretta and Apido really are that good. Guess it means I'm gonna have to use that now. Dino had the perfect way to end this. He preferred not to resort to it, since it brought up some annoying memories, but now was no time for complaints. All right. I admit it. You're good. In fact, you should be proud that you made me take this seriously. The moment he shouted it, he unlocked the ability stored within him. The ultimate power granted to him by Veldanava, the ultimate skill Astarte, Lord of High Heaven. Confirmed. Using the creation ability of the ultimate skill Astarte to evolve the unique skill Sloth. Successful. Dino's Sloth skill had the unique trait of building up its force the less its owner physically moved around. It could hold a store of energy for later use, and that's what Dino now used to evolve Sloth into the new ultimate skill Belphegor, Lord of Sloth. That was his last option, evolution, a subset of the ultimate skill Astarte. With Astarte in hand, he could evolve his skills, but not anyone else's, to have whatever effect he desired. That wasn't all there was to it, of course, but either way, Dino wanted to keep Astarte hidden as much as he could. There were eyes everywhere within the labyrinth, with all kinds of data being constantly recorded. As a monitor himself, he had a natural inclination not to fully reveal himself. Besides, I know Rimuru. He's crafty, constantly working on a vast scale with deep insight. When he killed off Clayman, he even presented that screen with his evidence on it. If he sees my power, I'm sure he'll try to take measures against it. The demon lord Rimuru was underestimated at one's peril. There was no such thing as being too careful, a credo that had baked itself deep into Dino's bones. So Dino created Belphegor, a power he didn't mind showing around. It was aimed straight for Beretta. Go to sleep. Fallen catastrophe. The laws of nature were rewritten, its positive elements being reversed and turned negative. The temptation they created lured everything, living and dead, into ceasing all activity and going into stasis. But it wasn't a forced effect, it was up to the targets to take the lure and walk down the path to destruction themselves. That made it a type of hypnosis, albeit one that worked on a whole other dimension. There was no waking up from a Belphegor-driven sleep, for it destroyed both your spirit and your physical body. Of course, while the destination of this lure was doom, Dino could turn the intensity down and put the target into a more traditional hypnotic state. It was a really versatile skill that way, and it didn't use sound to transmit itself, so it couldn't be blocked by a barrier of any sort. It was impervious to many defenses, one of its strongest points. In short, Belphegor held rule over all intelligent, feeling things. Dino felt a little proud of himself. This was truly a fearsome, ultimate sort of evolution, a perfect symbol of sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins. He attempted to systematically destroy Beretta, preventing him from making any moves for a while. Destruction was his aim with this invocation, but the results were even more powerful than expected. Beretta had disappeared into a cloud of dust, so it'd undoubtedly be a while before he could resurrect himself. The bracelet went missing along with him, but that didn't bother Dino. Ramirez could probably make up for that. Besides, if he let up at all, he might have failed to complete his duty. So he didn't feel much responsibility for Beretta's fate. Don't hate me for that, Beretta. But, man, even Beretta's may be just mid-tier compared to the guys working directly under Rimuru, huh? Dino had a right to complain, perhaps. Someone as tricky as Beretta was on a decidedly lower echelon, not even possessing an ultimate skill. He wasn't even a demon lord, in fact, just an underling. The thought made Dino shiver a bit. What if one of the top-tier guys was still alive? Would he be able to win against whoever it was? His troubled eyes turned toward Ramirez, making sure she was still fast asleep. Then he touched her. Or he thought he did. Then Ramirez turned into a swarm of light, taking the form of a butterfly and fluttering its way around Dino, almost like it was snickering at him. Whoa, was that just a mirage? He couldn't believe it, and he didn't want to either. But there was no explaining this otherwise. This battle really was being monitored. I'm glad I thought enough ahead to be careful, but still. Even so, he had revealed one of his most powerful moves to the enemy. And what's more, his next opponent was bound to be even worse. The sound of lumbering footsteps echoed across the chamber. The beautiful butterfly of light flew toward the composed figure walking in, touching his arm. Then it became a smudge of light once more, and transformed again. Now it was the innocently sleeping Ramirez, looking blissfully unaware of anything. She was atop the forearm of this figure, and Beretta, who had revived in the meantime, respectfully took possession of her. Sir Beretta, the figure quietly said, please watch Lady Ramirez for me. By all means. Do you need any backup? Not at all. I can handle this myself. Ramirez had perfect coverage from the start. In the bottommost part of the safest place she could be, a certain person had laid several layers of traps, ordering the team to fight the advancing enemy in small bursts so their abilities could be laid bare. Most of all, however, this labyrinth had the world's strongest guardian inside. Before Veldora departed, he left Ramirez's protection to the man he saw as his top apprentice. Only Ramirez was unaware of all this. And now this figure went on the move. This man standing before Dino was Zijin, the Mist Lord and the undisputed champion of this labyrinth. Zijin had entered a cocoon in order to strengthen his abilities, but he'd remained conscious the whole time. Answering Veldora's call, he had a firm grasp of everything going on within the labyrinth, using his overwhelming absolute defense to guarantee Ramirez's safety. And now Dino realized it. I really wish people would stop joking with me. That was exactly how he felt. He'd thought he was victorious, and here came this brand new enemy, and apparently the point behind all this was to make him show off his skill set. I knew it. Rimuru's so damn treacherous that way. He was bound to try something like this. His mission was clearly a failure. He had failed to score Ramirez, and now his own escape was looking questionable. I mean, when did they get Ramirez out of here anyway? I was in this room the whole time, and I saw her talking to me. Was she long gone by the time she turned into that butterfly? If it wasn't that, Zijin must have gotten Ramirez out of there in a way Dino couldn't pick up on. But then, have I been talking to an illusion this entire time? That too was a problem. Dino possessed an ultimate skill and a brilliant talent for hypnosis, and yet he'd fallen for some magic illusion? That was unthinkable, but he couldn't call it impossible. If Zijin had an ultimate skill geared toward mentally oriented attacks, perhaps he could conjure something that even Dino would be fooled by. And he knew just how strong Zijin was. He was a humanoid magic-born, a powerful insectoid type and potential Demon Lord seed. Thanks to the favor of the Demon Lord Rimuru, he had gained near impossible levels of fighting force. With Veldora as his master, his fighting level might even surpass the primal demons. This made him the undisputed master of the labyrinth. When the Empire invaded this realm, his overwhelming strength had driven them all away, a feat Dino was around to witness. In his eyes, Zijin was all but unbeatable in hand-to-hand combat, but physical attacks were all he had showed off. He never tried any kind of spirit-based strike, and it seemed to Dino that he lacked even a unique skill, much less an ultimate. I mean, his distortion field was impressive enough to reach the ultimate realm, maybe, but that was still a physical ability. To Dino, more gifted in mentally driven strikes, it felt manageable. The only explanation for this was that celebration the other day. Rimuru infused some sort of people into Zijin then, in the name of providing a reward. He was awakening his servants and calling it an evolution ceremony or the like. Some of them, like Gabble, really did gain a bunch of power, with others going into an evolutionary sleep. It was all eerily reminiscent of a harvest festival, and if Zijin emerged from it with a new skill or two, it certainly made sense. But isn't this weird? How can those serving Rimuru reach the same levels that he has? I get it if an awakened demon lord's underlings reach seed proportions themselves, but if they're all as powerful as awakened demon lords, that's just cheating way too much. Dino, with all the years he had lived, could never have predicted this. Not even Guy could ever pull off something like that. Well, I could go on and on about him. The moment he made a primal serve him, I knew he was crazy right then. Nothing's off the table with him. Internally, Dino ranted against Rimuru for a few more moments. Those 3 girls, the most powerful of living demons, probably could have stopped him in his tracks. Regardless of what their EP stats were, it didn't really matter if they were primals. And Rimuru had recruited them like he was running a bowling team. It was just weird, and he wanted to be involved with him as little as he could. And now Zijin, standing before him, was every bit a primal's equal. Clearly, something strange was up. It wasn't just that he was million class, his sheer aura hummed with endless force. His ability defied all numbers. It was the atmosphere that only someone who obtained ultimate power could exude. It suggested that he too gained an ultimate skill, just as Dino had. This is exactly why I hate working so much. He wailed inside at the bad hand he'd been dealt. Then he sighed, a clear tinge of resignation to it, as he groped around for a potential best solution, but no good ideas came to him that easily. And then time stopped waiting for him. As Dino spent a short while pondering, the unaffected Zijin strode forward. "Did you have any last words?" Zijin asked. "You were hiding here, watching until I revealed my secrets, huh? Come the hell on, man. That's dirty." Ignoring his own dirty deeds for the moment, Dino vented his frustrations to start with. It was little more than lashing out, but if it riled his opponent at all, that'd be to his benefit. "Ha. It's called war." Zijin was, of course, undeterred. "I know." Dino countered, and that was the end of the exchange. Tension coursed between them. Dino knew how strong Zijin was, a fact he could call an advantage. But Zijin now knew the full extent of his own skills. A frontal assault was the only option, but close-range combat was Zijin's specialty, and although it wasn't confirmed yet, he likely possessed an ultimate skill too. Dino, meanwhile, was more about spirit attacks, unless he used his true finisher move, but he wanted to avoid that in the labyrinth. "Well, I already blew my cover in a lot of ways, but yeah, that really needs to end here." Besides, Dino kidded himself, if escape was all that mattered, he was probably still safe on that count. "Not coming for me?" Zijin's words were heavy. The question seemed to bolt him to the floor, but Dino used his willpower to fight back. "Ha! Don't you look down on me. I'm part of the octagram, you know, and I've lived way longer than you. No way am I gonna lose to a little kitten like you." He whipped his large blade up high and swung it down toward Zijin. "Take this, and breathe your last. Fallen strike." This was no tit-for-tat exchange of blows. He meant to end it here with this massive move, as befitting someone as lazy as Dino was. And Fallen Strike certainly had the punch for it. By infusing his sword with his unique skill Sloth, Dino had created an ever-changing illusory battle style that tricked his opponent and allowed him to control the fight. Now that skill had evolved into Belphegor, its effects multiplied many times over, so his illusory sword style was more polished than ever. He may have hated taking action, but Dino's battle sense was undeniable. Even so, Dino had decided that close-range combat with Zijin was a little too dicey. If his abilities failed to work on him, the illusory sword style would fail on him. Now, he figured, was no time to hold anything back, so he broke out one of his special moves. That was Fallen Strike, one of the few traditional sword moves in his illusory style, and he packed all of his muscle into it. His intention, to defang his opponent. Now his blade was infused with negative waves of emotion, robbing his foe of the will to live if it so much as scraped his skin. It wasn't an illusion or hallucination someone could ignore. For the weak-hearted, it was impossible to resist. Only those with a strong enough mind to obtain an ultimate skill could fight it off, and even then, they wouldn't emerge unscathed. The slothful will Dino infused in the strike packed a physically destructive effect inside. Even if you dodged it, it emitted negative waves in all directions, and simply being exposed to them would sap your mental drive, and thus, your ability to battle. He could capitalize on that to strike the final blow off the follow-through, and then it'd be over. The move cornered his foe in so many ways, making it one of the best Dino could make, a masterpiece he had complete confidence in. If Dino wanted to leave this room alive, his best bet was to defeat Zijin without holding back. He liked to hide all his best moves, but if it made life easier for him, he wouldn't skimp on them either. Not even Guy would look all that great if he took a direct hit from this. Think you can fare any better? Dino grinned, all but assured of his opponent's death. It'd be impossible, he reasoned, for anybody to expect this major strike from someone so demonstrably lazy in life. Now, he thought, singing his own praises in his mind, everything was back on track. Zijin didn't move. Not because he couldn't react in time, but because he had no problem dealing with this. Reading the path of Dino's blade, he stopped it just before it landed on its target. Fang Smasher, the mighty god-class greatsword, had enough force to crush any type of matter in the world, but even when it was swung down on him, the exoskeleton covering Zijin's left hand, now converted into crimson steel, easily blocked it. Damn fool! Dino shouted. You didn't even try to dodge my blade. The battle is mine. Now, he thought, acting like such a lazy bum all this time had finally paid off. It wasn't really an act, to be honest, but he kidded himself into thinking so. Zijin, as expected, had stopped his high-speed strike. Swords this big lost out in velocity, so that was no surprise. The damage, however, would be untold. Zijin blocked it with one hand, as if swatting something away. It was impressive to see. But now an intense shock wave was coursing through his left arm. Looks like it didn't crush it outright, but it'll be useless for a while to come, for sure. I love how he's just standing there, not even quivering. So much fake bravado. It was almost hateful, how unaffected Zijin looked. But Dino had one. Zijin's distortion field was an excellent invention, but it could block only physical strikes. Fallen Strike, upgraded to its ultimate level, could penetrate any physical obstacle as it delivered its payload. I put him off guard, made him think it was a sword attack, but actually delivered a lethal spirit strike. My strategy won the day. Yes, Zijin was strong. That, Dino predicted, was why he was likely to look down on him and try to act as superior as possible. He was best in close range, and this chamber was a perfect arena for that. The way Dino saw it, there was no way he'd try to evade anything. Humph, he spat. I wish you guys would knock this off already. I know that bracelet's gonna revive you anyway, so I really need to retrieve Ramirez soon. He headed for Beretta. But then he stopped. Something felt off. For one thing, Beretta wasn't even wary of him. After all this battle, plus revealing several of his trump cards, Dino was running short on magicules. He still wouldn't lose, but Beretta was acting like he was assured of victory out of nowhere. His face wasn't visible under the mask, but it still felt creepy, somehow. You think you can beat me? Hehehe. Don't be silly. Whether I could or not is irrelevant, I am not your opponent. The moment he heard that, Dino was struck with an intense chill. In a frenzy, he turned toward Zijin, and yes, there was something unnatural about that stationary figure. The fact that he wasn't pulverized by a god-class strike proved that his left arm was god-equivalent. That meant he could have a will strong enough to work as a spiritual life form. All that deliberating over whether he had an ultimate skill seemed pointless now. The evidence was clearly on the yes side. No way. Let me ask you, does your attack have a delayed effect? Because otherwise, did you think a passing breeze like that strike could defeat me? God damn it, Dino thought. Zijin really did have an ultimate skill. Exactly what kind was unclear, but if it could nullify his spiritual attack, it had to be exceptional. You were wondering if I possessed an ultimate skill, weren't you? If so, you should have pieced several attacks together instead of that meager swipe. You need to realize that your laziness cost you the victory. Don't act like you won this, Dino almost screamed. Instead, Zijin thrust his left fist at him. His fingers opened outward, and from them, 5 beams of light shot out. It was his dimension ray. Ow wow. Leaping away to dodge it, Dino just barely avoided lethal damage. It came, however, at the cost of his right arm, which was now severed at the elbow. The pain made him want to cry, but there was no time for it. His instincts were warning him that he truly was in danger if this continued. You really did find an ultimate. Didn't you, you bastard? I didn't expect you to neutralize fallen Thanatos as well. Are you telling me spirit attacks don't work on you? Fallen Thanatos was a lethal spiritual attack Dino had instilled in his fallen strike just now. It acted strictly on the minds of its targets, so even if his foe was a replication or the like, it would still impact the actual person, no matter how far away he was. It was a sure kill move, no escape possible, but Zijin was totally undeterred. Dino could hardly believe it, and he was right to. If he wanted to win, or, really, if he wanted to escape here alive, he needed to solve this mystery. So he asked Zijin, knowing full well an answer was not likely to arrive. I have no duty to inform you why. Zijin, naturally, was unmoved. But his bitter voice continued. But you are so pitiful, I will dignify your question with a reply. I am an illusion, a ghost. From the very beginning, you were wrapped around my finger. I have been granted the title of Mist Lord, ruler of the Phantom Realm, and now you realize that no spirit attacks can faze me. It was the strong offering mercy to the weak. Hearing it, Dino quickly arrived at the truth, and then he was shocked. If his skill had been nullified, it meant his foes was stronger. Zijin, he now realized, had evolved into something as good, if not better, than him, the him right now, even. You've got to be kidding me. He was this good at close range, but now he's even better at spirit attacks. And he's the ruler of the Phantom Realm? So he can, like, create independent worlds of his own? Oh man, how much stronger did that bastard get? No damn way I could beat him with no preparation. Dino possessed the strongest of sin-based skills, one freshly evolved into an ultimate, but Zijin had shut it completely down. His skill was still unfamiliar, but that was no excuse. Zijin didn't have an ultimate skill until just recently, either. Dino was hardly weak, but this time, he had picked the wrong opponent. All too wrong. The whole idea around attempting to kidnap Ramirez, in fact, was wrong at the core. The moment Zijin completed his evolution, its failure was all but ensured. Realizing this, Dino turned his face upward, and just then, he was stunned by a person he saw on the screen. Ah, Velgrind. The beautiful woman was Velgrind. There was no mistaking that blue hair. She was supposed to be fighting the demon Lord Rimuru outside the labyrinth after taking out Veldora, but now she was standing next to Masayuki for some reason. Even more concerning, Cornu was nowhere to be seen. No. No. He had a bad feeling about this, and those tended not to lie to him. He knew that from experience. Dude, wait a second. This is too much information to handle at once. I can't keep up with it. So, like, Velgrind was supposed to be under Feldway's thrall, but was that all a lie? Or did she escape it somehow? Either way, I guess she did Cornu in, huh? That. Wait, this is going way beyond a failed mission now, isn't it? Dino ran hastened thought as hard as he could, trying to understand the situation. Soon though, he concluded that it'd be impossible to keep this operation going, no matter how hard he tried. He might have been ready to turn tail and flee a while ago, but now, he'd lost all will to go on. In his mind, he had done well to survive this far. Say your prayers. You have touched the nether reaches of sin, and now you will die and struggle against the weight of your own dimension storm. Zijin had held rule over this space from the start. And that meant only one thing. No matter what Dino did, he could never leave. If he had made full use of the abilities he still kept under wraps, perhaps he might have found hope somewhere. But the chances of that were too comical to even bother trying, so Dino felt no qualms about giving up instead. In fact, if there was any chance at all. A storm of dazzling colors engulfed Dino, whisking him away into a realm where nothing existed nor would exist. It was a supernatural storm of highly energized particles, and Dino could do nothing against it as he was erased from the world, leaving not a trace of his body, or that's what should have happened. Huh. Your prayers paid off then. You've got impressive luck, at least, Zijin muttered to himself. The soft sound of something, somewhere, breaking could be heard, and he could feel Dino's existence being regenerated. Zijin could accurately see this, his voice calm. All of it was within his predictions. Dino woke up outside the labyrinth. Phew. I've won the bet, huh? He breathed a sigh of relief. His equipment was all there, completely undamaged. This must be, like, Ramirez letting me go out of kindness, isn't it? Dino looked at the broken bracelet in his hands. It was a resurrection bracelet, a cheap one he'd purchased at the labyrinth's shop long ago. He had never made use of a save point, so his location was reset to the surface after he died. He kept it on as an escape route, figuring something like this was entirely possible. Well, she never gave me an unlimited use bracelet, so she must have been pretty suspicious of me from the start. She coulda cancelled this one on me too though. She sure went easy on me. He wistfully reflected on it. Here he was, secretly carrying an insurance item created by a girl he was sent to kidnap. It took someone like Dino to justify an act so unprincipled in his mind. The bracelet was a cut price, one-use type, something Ramirez produced in mass quantities. He had staked his life on it, and apparently the heavens were on his side. Fallen or not, I'm still an angel, I guess. Dino let his mind wander a bit as he looked around. He wanted to find his companions, who were presumably fighting Geld right now, and get the hell out of there. He also sent a thought communication to Zerario to report on his failure. His angelic partners had set up an escape route so he wouldn't be locked in the labyrinth, so none of them was likely to leave until Zerario got out. But with things falling apart like this, sticking around was a bad idea. Still though, that dude was way too strong. It sucked so bad. Even recalling Zijin made him want to whine to himself. Feldway was gonna be seriously angry, but still, he was lucky to be alive. Like, this might be the first time any of Feldway's plans didn't work out. I guess Cornu screwed up again, but... well, I dunno where he is. We really should never have opposed Rimuru. He had never been too eager about his role in this. Now Dino wondered why he ever accepted it in the first place. Thinking about the future just depressed him. Really, if Zijin had become that much of a monster, a conventional assault on the labyrinth like this was hopeless. He, along with all the other top-level people in Rimuru's government, was a total monster. Dino couldn't say exactly what had happened to Rimuru and his team yet, but he was sure it was nothing he'd be glad to hear of. This is why I didn't want in on this. Dino just wanted a tranquil life in the labyrinth, and now look at what had happened. Perhaps it's what he deserved for what he did, but it was still depressing. I dunno what's going on in Feldway's mind, but I doubt he'll give up. Not that this is ever gonna be possible. If he had to guess, the best chance they'd ever get had come just a moment ago. That was wholly gone now, and Dino knew it wouldn't come back. Plus, there was one more problem. Man, and now that I've made myself an enemy, there's no way I can go back. To someone as lazy-minded as Dino, life in the labyrinth was about as comfortable and easygoing as it got. It might have been work, but helping Vesta was fun. Gabble got along with him too, occasionally doing favors for him and so on. Whenever the research team made a new discovery, it gladdened him as well. These were engaging days he had spent with Vesta and the gang, and in time, he saw them as friends. That, and something else Dino almost forgot. He only came here because Guy ordered him to. He was functioning as a spy for him, reporting back on goings-on inside the labyrinth. Dino didn't think Guy expected much from him, really, but that just soured his mood even further. He can be such a pain when he's mad. He truly was. But now fretting over all this seemed pointless too. So Dino headed over to his companions instead. By the time he reached them, the battle was at a stalemate. Geld the Barrier Lord and Garasha were locked in combat, and amazingly, they were equals in sheer muscle. Dino could hardly believe what he saw. If he's equal to Gara, that makes him stronger than me, huh? And if he's like that right after his evolution, that's just... Ugh. Geld was bloodied. Exactly who the blood belonged to was unclear, because he had no obvious open wounds. Injuries dealt with magical damage couldn't be healed with a potion, and Garasha was clearly throwing around enough magic to destroy him. If Geld was unhurt by all of that, either he had crazy defense or superhuman healing skills. As Dino thought about this, Garasha swung her long sword. It slashed through Geld's scale shield and cleaved into his arm. Geld didn't respond. Throwing away his broken shield, he took a new one out from his stomach and returned to his fighting stance. And there Dino could see it, there wasn't even a scar on Geld's arm any longer. Ah, it's ultra-speed regeneration. And it's advanced enough to even heal Garasha's attacks. Now he had an answer. But Dino wasn't too happy about it. Ugh. Why are you so stubborn? None of my attacks is even phasing you. Are you crazy or something? Am I? I'm not sure myself. Perhaps I should give more praise to your attacks? Oh, sarcasm, huh? Gah. I have to kill you in one stroke or you'll just heal instantly. I ought to be praising you for how damn tough you are. Such was the exchange as Geld and Garasha flew back into battle, gouging into each other's openings without caring how much it damaged them. Geld's meat cleaver was deflected back by Garasha's circle shield, generating an intense flurry of sparks and a shock wave that traveled along the ground. Dino was too dazed to use his chance to speak up. Geld always existed behind the scenes as this revered figure. He did nothing flashy in the war against the Empire, and Dino didn't see him as much of a threat. That was a serious mistake. Now I'm sure of it. Everyone in this damn country is just totally insane. He forced himself to accept this as fact, a truth finally dawning on him, even as a fearsome aerial battle erupted above him. Ugh. Stop irritating me with all that flying around. That's what I want to say. You got a lot of nerve, flying with no wings. Heh. A simple matter if you have control over gravity. But I'm getting bored with this game of tag. Can we put an end to it? Again, that's what I want to say. The bewitching Kamara was taking on Pico, who looked like a young child by comparison. They actually made a good-looking couple, but their battle was pretty intense. Pico's black thunder, launched so often that it seemed to cover the ground beneath them, had blackened the surrounding area, but somehow, it never quite reached Kamara. It made sense. Reiko, the thunder tiger and one of the tail beasts that Kamara kept as a pet, was born to handle lightning, making defense a simple matter. Then Kamara went on the move, as if declaring it her turn. Using 8 of her tails in an elegant, flowing pattern, she unleashed 9-tail slash, only to have it blocked by Pico's lance. A shrill clang shot across the battlefield. They were an even match for each other, and once again, Dino had to revise his opinion of Kamara's fighting skill upward. She's one of the 12 lordly guardians, isn't she? Man. Better not mess with any of them. He had to admit it. There wasn't any need to point out this or that member, they were all threats. That was the safest way to think about it. As former Seraphim, Pico and Garasha were up there with awakened demon lords. They had been away from battle for a while, so their capabilities couldn't be compared that simply, but they clearly weren't pushovers. With Tempest's leaders out of the picture, Dino figured he and these two women were enough to take over the labyrinth, and yet Feldway was ever so careful, deploying 2 mystic leaders and even joining the fray himself. Victory was completely assured, but look what they had here now. The reality of it all made him feel dizzy. Pico and Garasha seemed to be gradually losing their cool, perhaps because their battle skills were so rusty. But whatever level they were at now, they used to be top-level Seraphim. If 2 out of the shining 7 primordial angels were struggling this much, their pride must have been in tatters. Dino wasn't helping much, but he ignored that for now. Hey! Guys! Retreat! We gotta retreat. The 2 of them reacted angrily to Dino's shouting. But we're just getting to the good part. Stop talking nonsense when I'm about to get serious with this. Shut up. This entire operation fell apart the moment you joined the melee. Pico and Garasha's role was supposed to be rear support. There was a large blank in their battle experience, so they were playing it safe this time. If they had been dragged into a fight, it proved the enemy was more powerful than expected. A tactical victory here meant nothing strategically for the war. Wait, is the mission off? Huh. Yeah, it is. I wouldn't have fled the labyrinth if it wasn't. What? But didn't Faye come up with our plans? A perfectionist as careful as him misjudged the enemy, you're saying? Guess so. Don't be stupid. How could we have failed this if we had both Zorario and Cornu on the scene? Because we lost. I sent word to Zorario to pull out, but I'm pretty sure Cornu is dead. We didn't achieve any of our objectives, but there's no point fighting this out any longer. Are you serious? This is really blowing my mind. Pico and Garasha were speechless. Geld and Kamara couldn't have been prouder. Oh. Garasha looked at Dino. So does that mean you lost too? Huh. Look, can you stop asking that over and over again? Get the picture. Can't you be thoughtful enough to pretend not to notice? Dino was as detached from his problems as usual. Garasha was stunned, not by the news but by how nonchalant he was about all this. Regardless, there was no reason to doubt him. Their minds were calm, and they both realized that retreat was the only acceptable way. Eesh. This doesn't mean you won, got it? I am aware. Even during our battle, you were funneling some of your powers toward maintaining the labyrinth, weren't you? Next time, I want to take you on at your full force. Heh. Ahahaha. Now you're speaking my language. I like that. In that case, see you. Recognizing each other's strength, Garasha and Geld made a friendly parting of ways. Pico and Kamara, on the other hand. Your name was Pico. You're lucky to escape alive today. What? Come on, I wasn't even trying that hard. You're the one who ought to thank their lucky stars. They glared at each other, then huffily turned away. It was two opposites attitude-wise, but either way, it heralded the end of battle. With that, Dino and his allies managed to escape in one piece. Zorario was always cool-headed. His job on this mission was to serve as a diversion, and he carried it out with perfection. The troops he brought along with him were fighting on the same level as the resisting forces in the labyrinth, literally. But, surprisingly enough, they would need to reconsider their enemies. That was the conclusion Zorario made as he sized up the battlefield. Most impressive of all were the two people in front of him, Cheris and Trainee. Those were the names they gave, and Zorario felt it was worth his time to memorize them. Even so, he reasoned that it still wasn't worth his time to exercise his full powers against them. I was told only the most insignificant of resistance remained for us, but that appears not to be the case. I thought my counterattack wiped out their forces in the labyrinth, but that powerhouse Zijin was still in there? Hopefully Cornu and Dino wrapped up their missions before he awoke. It was a cause for concern, but Feldway's plans never went awry. That's what Zerario trusted in as he enjoyed this battle. Lord Veldora is going to laugh at us for being toyed with by these half-engaged foes. I wouldn't worry about that. Veldora's lost to Velgrind and fallen into our hands. That's not a funny joke. It's not meant to be. You saw it too, didn't you? They're a little panicked. The magic-born Cheris boasted superb strength. He was a rare talent, even given all the many dimensions Zerario had seen and destroyed. Trainee was impressive too, a magic-born infused with an elemental lord, but she couldn't beat out Cheris. Her gifts lay in high-intensity magic, but none of it worked on Zerario, so she wasn't a problem. Cheris too, could fire rays of heated light by nimbly controlling and compressing heat energy, but Zerario's distortion field could neutralize it all. No, the thing he had to watch out for was Cheris' calm and precise decision-making. Unlike Trainee, he seemed to size up Zerario in this battle, proceeding carefully and testing out how every move of his worked. Zerario's experience told him that a foe like this couldn't be trifled with. But it was just about over now. Once Cheris panicked a bit, he lost his careful style. The battle was about to get a lot less enjoyable, and Zerario thought it time to wrap things up. I hate to say it, but let's bring matters to an end, shall we? You are both quite heroic warriors and extremely strong to boot, but sadly, you do not pose a challenge to me. The difference was apparent. Zerario had a much larger energy store. But the deciding factor was how they matched up. Angels held an advantage over spirits, and Cheris and Trainee, whose powers were based in the elements, had no decisive measure against a seraphim, even a fallen one, like Zerario. I hate to say it, but Doroth appears close to her limit. I cannot keep my elemental lord for longer than a handful of seconds. Sir Cheris, do you have any strategies left? No, sadly. But Sir Rimuru and Sir Veldora taught me nothing if not the core strategy of never giving up. So don't worry. Despite it being a hopeless situation they had no way of clawing out of, Cheris grinned, as if the battle had just begun. Trainee smiled back. In that case, let me join you. We can't allow these insolent intruders to do as they please in Lady Ramirez's labyrinth. They were heavily damaged but still ready to fight. Their hearts showed no sign of breaking, which made Zerario roll his eyes. Oh, come on. I don't think you're foolish enough not to see the writing on the wall, but are you planning to pathetically cling to life until the very end? Because if you think you can resurrect yourselves regardless, you are very much mistaken. By Zerario's calculation, Dino would have ferried Ramirez out of the labyrinth right around now. Any immortality the labyrinth granted you worked only because Ramirez was inside it. To be exact, her leaving the labyrinth wasn't enough to turn that off, but if she did so and lost consciousness, all her memories would instantly be reset. Thus, the moment Dino carried out his job, Ramirez's servants would lose their immortality. Zerario knew that, and that's why he went easy, piling damage on Cheris and Trainee instead of killing them outright. In recognition of your valor in battle, I could grant you a proud, painless death if you like. That was his way, as one of the strongest of warriors, of offering mercy. But Cheris and Trainee were obviously uninterested. Hehehe. Think you've already won, fool? Indeed. You never know what could happen in a battle. As long as we don't give up on victory, we will never lose. Don't you know that? That sore loser stance was enough to rile Zerario, not enough to make him lose his calm, but he didn't appreciate this sass. How annoying. I was trying to grant you mercy. Mercy? Ah, so many people lose their fight after trying to act so undisturbed. Do you know what we call talk like that? We call it a death flag. Cherries recalled the things never to say list he'd discussed with Veldora once. There were a few absolute no-nos, but the worst of all was trying to act cool just before you secure the win. If you're out to kill, you have to take action, not get distracted. Otherwise, you're simply giving your opponent time to strike back. Oh, stop it. Are you expecting a miracle too? They do happen. Sir Rimuru's engineered quite a few of them in his time, and his troops are so used to seeing them, they often imitate them for themselves. And look what we have here. In the labyrinth, merely buying time in a battle often held little strategic significance. The same was true for this one. Exactly. And if you wish to strike at Lady Ramirez, friend and servant to my god, let it be known that Adelman the Gehenna Lord will take you on. But instead, all that stalling allowed for the birth of another warrior. What does throwing one more body into the fray achieve? Zorario was far more concerned by Dino's delays reporting back to him. He's late. I know he's lazy by default, but whenever he procrastinates like this, it only creates more work for me. That, combined with things not going his way in this battle, irked him more. And now this knight-like man was standing in front of him. I hate to fight in a large group against a single opponent, but I am no longer a righteous paladin. Deeds matter to me more than chivalry, and I hope you'll forgive me for that. This was Alberto speaking. He bore a suit of god-class armor gifted to him by Rimuru, and after the more metaphysical gifts he'd received thanks to Adelman's awakening, he had evolved into a Gehenna paladin. Now, as the rightful owner of the shining armor he wore, Alberto pointed his sword at Zorario. There's another one, Zorario said. He could tell that the aura Alberto emitted was a fearsome sight to behold. His movements were the mark of a seasoned swordsman, and the god-class blade in his hand contained the potential to seriously wound Zorario. One look, and it was clear he shouldn't be ignored. I'm here too. This voice belonged to Venti, the dragon lord of the underworld, who had awoken from her evolutionary slumber, reborn as a Gehenna dragon. She offered Zorario an elegant bow, a trick she must have learned from somewhere. Zorario rewarded it with a blank stare. Now he realized just what sort of fix he was in. Even against this lineup, if it was a yes/no question, then yes, he could win. But victory alone wouldn't be meaningful. Unless Dino took Ramirez out of the picture, Zorario wouldn't even have a victory. If I go all out here, I'll simply reveal my hand and have nothing to show for it. But if I don't, I'll be in trouble against this crew. Against Cherries and Trainee alone, Zorario could go easy and still hold his own. But if 3 titans on an awakened demon lord's level joined in, not even he liked his chances. But he still needed to serve as a diversion, or Feldway's entire strategy would fall to pieces. Zorario enjoyed a perfect record for carrying out his missions. He refused to allow that to happen. So be it. I'm going to kill them all anyway. Let's show them what I've got. But just as Zorario steeled his resolve. Ah, yes. Allow me to relate something that I think you'll find interesting. The area I normally guard is on floor 70, but why do you think I've been ignoring the intruders in there? What? Well, no point keeping you in suspense. Let me sum it up for you. It's because there isn't even any need for me to show up. What are you getting at? Adelman, the undead in the mage's robe, flashed an evil grin. Zorario was getting peeved. Hold on. There was no need for him to show up. Cornu was supposed to be invading that floor. Did something happen to him? There was no need to ask. Zorario quickly deducted the truth. But since Adelman was here to divert Zorario from his mission, he said it out loud anyway. The foolish intruder has been eliminated by Lady Velgrind. That's why I came here without a trace of concern in my mind. Hehehe. I see. I'm sure Cornu was defenseless against Velgrind, then. It seems some strange events have been taking place, but enough about that for now. So is this pittance of a force all that remains from your side? Why wasn't Velgrind here? Probably because of Masayuki, Zorario figured. Masayuki must have inherited Ladora's soul after all. Feldway, poring over the Imperial Information Bureau's records, had ordered Masayuki killed in order to eliminate the possibility, but now the possibility was the truth, and Velgrind must have realized it. Bad luck for Cornu, then. This wouldn't have happened, either, if we hadn't swapped roles as planned. But Velgrind can be safely ignored. As long as Sir Michael is with us, it'll be easy to rule over her. Right now, Dino was the key factor. You seem undisturbed. Well, perhaps you were strong enough to take on Lady Velgrind if needed, then? We really have been underestimated, haven't we? Heavens, we could have taken you on en masse and lost, even. Cherise and Adelman were being clever for a reason. Based on Zorario's attitude, they could tell he was hiding some great, unknown power. Despite that, however, the advantage was still with their team, as Adelman was about to explain. I think I understand the reason for your question. Your true aim is Lady Ramirez, is it not? Our standing orders always tell us to place Lady Ramirez's safety above all other concerns. When he woke up, checking on Ramirez was the first thing Adelman did. As long as she was safe, everything else could work itself out. Besides, it was Rimuru's supreme order. They were all floor guardians tasked with guarding the labyrinth, and that meant keeping Ramirez safe. So is Lady Ramirez safe? Of course, Lady Trainee. Sir Zijin came to her aid, and I'm sure he won't let anyone touch Lady Ramirez. Ah. Quite a relief, then. Trainee smiled. The rest of the group looked just as relieved. Now they could focus entirely on the enemy right here. For Zorario, meanwhile, the mention of Zijin's name made him fear the worst about Dino. Zijin can cast Distortion Field, as far as I recall. If Dino got serious. No, there's no point expecting that much from him. He was never too enthusiastic about this to start. By now, I'm sure he had a notably accurate picture of matters. And it was at that moment when Dino sent him a thought communication. Hey, Zorario, you hearing this? The mission's a failure. Velgrind got into the battle, and Cornu screwed the pooch, I guess. I'm running into some serious hombres here too, so I'm splitting. You better run before the labyrinth closes up. See you around. It was all so one-sided. Zorario couldn't help but chuckle at it. How very Dino-like of him, he thought. But the time to retreat was here. Winning this battle would be pointless, and he had a reason to avoid pointless maneuvers. I have to say, I've never been so humiliated before. Look at me, forced to retreat against this rabble I could knock over with a flick of my finger. It won't be the case next time, remember that. After matter-of-factly playing the sore loser, Zorario took his team and teleported out of the scene. The group he left behind was filled not with the glory of victory but a sense of sheer relief. They had kept the labyrinth safe. Now all threats were gone from the labyrinth. Zijin turned off his fantastical world ability, then faced Beretta, who had just finished laying Ramirez out on a couch. Did we let Sir Dino get away? Looks that way. Hee hee. No need to put it like that. Lady Ramirez was merciful enough to allow Sir Dino to leave. Beretta was right. Zijin had noticed that Dino was wearing a resurrection bracelet, but he still let him go. It was a sort of experiment. Would Ramirez's protection work against someone openly hostile to her? And the results were now clear. Dino placed his bet, it paid off, and he was alive. To Zijin, it was the same thing either way. Carrying out this experiment was a pleasant bonus, but his victory condition here was to keep Ramirez safe, and that was now complete. If Lady Ramirez wills it, I have no objection. Beretta nodded. If they had fended off the enemy, there was no need for further bloodshed. If the enemy couldn't realize what a merciful act this was though, next time would be different. Depending on how Dino reacted, Zijin was prepared to pursue him. He was prepared to kill him if he didn't get the hint and run away, but that no longer seemed necessary. Dino was now convincing his allies to retreat, and 2 of them had accepted the invitation and left the area. So what about this Serario? Sir Adelman is dealing with him. His presence has disappeared, so presumably he gave up and left. Adelman and his cohorts were awake and back in action, and that was apparently enough to dissuade the remaining enemies. Excellent news. Yes. And we would have easily lost if Lady Ramirez wasn't here. Indeed. Even if we didn't, we likely would have lost many, and that's as good as defeat to us. Exactly. Zijin and Beretta exchanged nods, agreeing to consider ways to beef up their security measures later. With this, the continued safety of the labyrinth was assured. Checking one more time to ensure Ramirez was safe, Zijin returned to his usual domain.